slides before the slide. Yeah, just before we went through the slides, we had gone through different modules and all. So what I have done is I have tried to if you look at the repository, it already has some yesterday it was not, but today it already has some of the server code, and for which we will be writing test today. The server is almost there. I mean, almost there. When I say almost there, I mean it is a working server and it has a good code for making the server functional now. We'll just be writing some tests for those endpoints and those models and models and all, right? But at the same time, what I have done is I already have made some branches, GitHub branches, so that for example, let's say if you are in module one and if you are going through the second point of the module one, then probably if you are working on it, then we can create a main, we can fork out a new branch from the main branch, something like module and section and subsection, and the solution will already be there in the module uh, hyphen solution branch. So often what I'll be typing here, it will mostly be there. Most of the solutions are already there as of now. If you see, last few of them are remaining, which we'll be doing alongside today. So yeah, that will after the session, it will also be there in those branches. It will be available on those branches, right? So yeah, when I mentioned check out to this branch, you can check out to that branch, and then you can also see the solutions and all. So in case of let's say if you if you encounter any issues, so first of all let us know so that we can debug it together. We can probably we can go through a why that issue occurred, or probably what are the possible alternatives of it. At the same time, just so that you don't feel that you are that you have fellow that you have left behind after with a lot of margin of things to cover up, you can simply just check out to the branch that we'll be sharing, and you can come in sync with us in general as well, right? So that is one thing that I have tried. Hopefully it might help. And yeah, to follow along, please check the current sheet branch. For the solution, we have a branch already that might help you in case, as already explained to you, right? So yeah, whenever you're working towards it, just make sure you have the latest main branch. We'll be just creating new branches. Some of the branches already exist. Some of the solution branches already exist, so that you can simply refer to it. But yeah, for the branches that does not exist, we'll just create new one, and then we'll type along in the session. Okay. So any queries till now? If you any of you have any queries, you can discuss about it as of now. Otherwise, we can simply start with the tutorial for today. I guess not. Yeah.
Hey Kuldeep, you are not
Yeah.
audible.
Am I not audible? Is it the case with everyone? Was I not audible throughout the sessions, or how was it? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. 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 Yeah. I think everyone can hear me. Yes. I think it's good. The mic is good, I guess. We cannot unmute. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess when we have some question, probably I think since I will unmute you and then we can discuss about it. But I think for the time being, connection, whatever your DV user does not exist. Okay. Do we need Python 3.11? Nitish, Python 3.10 will also work. 3.11 is fine. If you don't have 3.11, 3.10 will also work. But if 3.11 is there, it's better because the poetry is configured to work with 3.11, not 10. So yeah, that might be an issue. But is it working? I mean, has everyone a working setup with them as of now, as we speak? So if we see, this is the okay. So I will just go through the is my screen visible? Or I think I should switch to different schema so that I think let me make it light. I think that should be visible for everyone. If it is not, let me know. I will check. Yeah, so if we see, let's go through the README doc again, and let's start from there. Okay, cool. So if you see, there are a few requirements that we had. First was we need to have Git, we need to have Docker and Docker Compose, we need to have Poetry, and then Python 3.1 or something that we were looking to install. I guess you might already have Git and Docker and Docker Compose. Poetry is also easier. The link is already attached and the steps are already mentioned. And at the same time, you can also check out the Poetry's official website and install the Poetry. And for Python 3.11, I think now most of the platforms support Python 3.11. So you might already have it. But in case, is there anyone who does not, your screen showing the slide, screen not visible? Cannot see the screen. Is it the case? Okay, let me see. Okay, yeah, I see. I see. Sorry, apologies for that. Let me share my whole screen. Okay, are you able to see it now? Can you see my screen now? Okay, I guess. Yeah, okay, okay, cool. Apologies. Yeah, I will go through it again, right? So we had four basic requirements that we had to install: Git, Docker, Docker Compose, Poetry, and Python 3.11. So I get Git is something that we already must be having. Docker and Docker Compose is also simple. We just had to follow the link and we just had to install it. Poetry is also easier, but I mean, we just had to run some scripts both in Windows and Linux and Mac. We already have list of already have a defined script and that should simply work fine. Python 3.11 might be trickier, but I just would want to know how many of you don't, how many of you are not able, not actually able to run the repository as of now. Is there anyone who is yet to run the first setup for the repository at shared? And before that, the first question would be, do you have the, can you see, do you have the link of the repository that I'm referring to? Installing Psycho setup went fine for me yesterday. Okay, cool. Nitish, can you pull again? Can you pull again and then can you run it now? Usually, when you don't have Postgres installed locally, we often see it, but uh, I have updated it so that we should not need it. I mean, this issue should not exist. So if you can just pull it and if you can run it, yeah, you need yeah, that is also there. And Ubuntu, it's sudo peninsula. Yeah, it's as simple as Bill mentioned over there. Connection to a server, blah blah blah. DODB row does not. It is something that I'm facing. So let's see. So yeah, okay. After installing all these things, we had to do a few things. First was we had to obviously we had to check out to main, and we had to then check out the latest branch, and then we had to copy this environment variable file. We had one in env.tmp file, and then we had to copy it so that it becomes something like this. And so that, yeah, we should have these four values in general. And probably you might have run it earlier, right? So Nitin, if you can simply do docker compose down -v, I will just simply write docker compose down -v. Just run this and then do docker compose up. Hopefully it should be fine. The issue might be because it did not find the .env file, so it might have created a Postgres server. But now since it is finding the .env file, it is not able to actually link it because the credentials don't match. So can you just quickly run it and let me know if you're still facing the same issue? Okay, till then replies. Let's see. So what we had to do was to run this server, we had to run two things. The first thing was Redis and okay, issue ahead is on Intel Mac. If you do reinstall Poetry, it does not work. So I use pip install. Yeah, yeah. Both are interchangeable. Sometimes because of the brew cache issue, sometimes it happens that brew install does not work. But yeah, pip install is already is always an option. And if pip install is also not working, then we also have an install to run one command that they give us, right? You can just copy from the website and then you can paste it out. So it should be fairly simple, and then it should be fine. So I guess we don't have any more issues if I'm not wrong. But able to log into, yeah, okay, cool. Nitish, what about you, Nitin? Are you able to spin it up? Are you still facing any issue? Okay, I have proceeded to the next step. Okay, okay, great, great, yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is what it. So what we have to do is we have to run two things. Yeah, so what we can simply do is we can simply start the server Docker compose up -g, so that it will it will instantiate the Redis and Postgres that we'll be using, and it is running in the background. We don't have to worry about it. And then probably we can simply do we have to do is we are using poetry. So simply if you write poetry shell, it will automatically lead you to one of the poetry environment that might have been created. Or if it does not exist, then it will create it for you in general. So when if you run poetry shell, it will activate the poetry environment that will have. So just say just a background of what is the virtual environment, and what is the difference between poetry and the virtual environment. I'm still getting the rule does not exist. Uh, did you run Docker Compose down -v by any chance? Okay, we'll see when they reply. So yeah, the basic difference between poetry-based environment and normal version environment is that poetry is a better Python project management. Why I would say so is because the dependency management that poetry does is way better than the default management. Lately, Pip also had some upgrades on how Pip works in general, but yeah, poetry has been around for some time and it is very good. For example, if you look at the py project.tlml file, I will just quickly go through it, right? So we have the case where we have different kind of dependencies. There are some dependencies that should only exist in the production, and there's few dependencies that we require only in the staging environment, or some packages are there that we only need for specific things, not in the production environment. For example, one of those cases is running pre-commit or factory bar, right? So what happens is when we have different dependencies, it becomes easier for us to handle those things. At the same time, when let's say if we build Docker images and things like it saves us a lot of space, because we are not building the Docker image with the dev dependency that we would be needing when we'll be building an image for the production systems and all. So yeah, and likewise, whenever we install some of the dependencies, it automatically checks whether if we have any dependency issues and all, if we have any contradiction with underlying dependencies that we might have. So yeah, the crux is it is very useful in having any project manager. I'm still getting the role does not exist. Choosing admin as DB settings. Just shared something. I did the Docker Compose down, then trying to run migration is when I. Oh, so did you run Docker Compose down -v? -v is important because what -v will do is what happens is when Postgres is created, a volume is automatically attached with it, right? So when we do Docker Compose down, the database is actually not down. The data that might have been created when we earlier run Docker Composer still exists. So the -v flag is very important. If you can run it again. Okay, you did it -v, and then is where I'm seeing the error. Okay, but after Docker Compose, okay, you did Docker Compose up as well, and then you're trying to run migration. I wish I could ask you to share the screen. Is it Sanjay? Is it possible? If we can have it, so that if we can have them,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, if you can allow an yeah, if they can simply share the screen, and we can simply check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, they can share the screen.
Yeah, yeah. So would deleting the existing Docker? and containers created from the command from doc. Yeah, that will also help, Aman. You can simply go on Docker desktop, likewise this, and you can simply you will have something here. For example, this is Django. Say you can just click here and then you can just click delete here, and that will also work fine. That is also there. But yeah, for the timing, Delphine, apologies if I'm not able to pronounce your name correctly, but if you can share your screen and show that so that we can quickly resolve the issue and we can get started with it, because I'm learning Docker a bit. I had to do that a lot. Can't share it. Okay. Is sharing allowed? Let me see. Screen share is allowed. Screen share is allowed, but hmm. So by default, by any chance, do you also have Docker? I think I have to stop sharing. Okay,
Not
is it like,
one second. I'll allow multiple share.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Please, please, please. That will help. That will be helpful.
Try now.
Okay, and yeah, can you just close it out like Control C and kill it, and yeah, run the Docker compose down minus V. Yeah, and yeah, run Docker compose up. Okay, it is running. Open a different shell, and there just see if you are able to, yeah. Operational error. Okay, can you do one thing? Just remove the double quote that we have, with the DB host. Can you just change it to simple? Oh no, I think which operating system are you using? Is it Windows or something? Mac OS. In Mac OS, I am able to run it. Hmm. Do you have the latest? Oh no, yeah, I think you have the latest code base. And what it is showing is connection to. You just pull your admin does not exist. Okay. So can you just change the name of the I'm getting the same error on MacBook. Okay. Who else? Okay. Okay. So I think can you change the name? I mean, instead of admin, just change it to something else, not admin, because I have a feeling the name admin might be reserved keyword and probably it might be causing some issue. So yeah, some different, maybe an admin underscore or anything, just DjangoCon or something. In the username, the DB name, and password might work, but yeah, in the DB user and the DB name, can you just change it to something else? The time to do this per session starting so support channel. Yeah, 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 yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, this will be the last time that let's just try for the last time. Can you do this again? Docker compose down minus V and then just see if it works on the other terminal. Yeah, just now. Can you run it again? No, so ran the server code was added. The core project and this dependency were not changed at all. So it should remain same. And now in the second terminal, can you just check it? On the second terminal, can you just run it? Docker Composer. Yeah, I'm sorry. Manager. The migrate command. Yep. Hmm. This is weird. This is weird. Okay. Let's look at it sometime later. I don't know what is. Is anyone also facing the same issue at this point of time? Poetry. Okay. So instead of poetry run, if you let's see if you run commercial phase, okay. So instead of this, run Python manage.py and then migrate. Instead of poetry run, simply run Python migrate.manage.py and then yeah. So okay, let me share my screen again. Hmm. Yeah. So once we clone the repository, run the poetry share command so that it initiates the poetry environment for us, and then let's run poetry install so that it installs the dependency that we have. I already have the dependencies installed, so it will not do anything for me. After pulling this morning, I'm unable to run initial is applied before the dependency. We can continue sharing my experience. Hmm, okay. It is okay. We'll have a look at it later. So yeah, once we run poetry install, it will install all the dependencies that we have, and then you can simply run Python. Okay, so I will do it again just so that you should be able to Docker compose down -v, and then Docker compose up. Let's do down up -c. So it creates it, and then I will say Python manager.py migrate, and yeah, I'm able to run it. I don't know if this is the issue, but I had a similar issue before the duplicate Postgres container running. Yeah, that might be there as well. See, if you have Docker desktop installed, just just open it and see if you don't have any duplicate containers over here. If you see any duplicate container, just kill it and try again. So it should work fine in general. So without let's go ahead in the session so that we we should be able to continue the rest of the session, right? So let's just jump over it. Yeah, so first of all, the question comes, why do you want to, why testing is so important? Why writing test is important? Because often people say, oh no, man, we have quality assurance team and all. We have a QA team, so why do you want to write tests again itself when the QA team is already gonna test it on their end? So yeah, quality assurance increases when we write tests, because now the default test probably the test cases they might miss out as a human error. Probably they won't be miss when we just write those as a part of our code itself. When we just write the code and at the same time we also write tests for it, so that yeah, the tests are already covered in the quality assurance in our code pipeline itself, right? So it basically mitigates a lot of issues, so that for example, if you are doing any change that is probably not backward compatible and things like it, we can simply get those things earlier, so that we don't have a to and fro again with the QA team raising the tickets again and things like that, right? So it helps in that way. Likewise, second is risk mitigation, because no matter how good developer we are all human. We have to understand it, and probably there's a very good chance that we might miss out, some of the basic cases that we have, and we don't want to have those things in production, right? We don't want to run into some of the replication cases where we did something and it broke some of the older pipelines or maybe older APIs or older compatibilities with some of the clients and things like that, right? So we just want to avoid it, so that instead of the clients complaining it, we detect it early on, and then we fix it and improved collaboration. So writing tests not only improves those two things at the same time. For example, I think of it more as a more from a perspective that writing tests also gives a documentation of how things work in general, right? For example, if there is a new engineer that is coming into the team, if you can simply show them how the tests are being written, how the tests are written, and if they're able to read the test, they will be able to simply understand how things work in general in for that flow, right? So apart from the documentation, that particular piece of code where we write test, it also works as a code, and at the same time, they are able to understand more from a code perspective, okay, that this flow works like it, right? So in a way, it also improves collaboration, especially for the tech teams who are who are actual engineers and things like that, right? So let's look at what we already get in by default in Django, right? So if we look at it, Django default test. So testing is testing is a built-in framework part of Django, and in one of we can add multiple test cases. There is a class test case that helps us write tests in Django. We'll be looking at it. At the same time, we have database isolation and all, right? So for example, what happens is, what do we mean by data isolation is when you write tests in different databases created, and the tests are performed in those different databases, and once the tests are run, those databases are destroyed again. So when we run the test, a new database is created, a test are run on those databases, and then they're destroyed again. So that the database isolation is there, and we are doing testing as it should be done, in an isolation environment where things are as we write the code in general. So these are some of the basic features of it. How do we run tests in by default in the default Django testing framework? We simply as we run run server command, right? We simply do Python manager.py, and then we run Python manager.py, and then we run simply pass the command test, and it will just run all the tests. What it does, what it does is basically it discovers files. It discovers a test based on test st.py, right? So any file that starts with test, it starts with test, and if it is a Python file, Django will try to see if there is any class that is a child of the test case class that they provide, and then they will mark those as a test, and then they will try to run it. So as a part of it, let's see how we can simply run it. If you are running, simply you can just write git checkout module -2 -2. Let's let's do it. Git checkout module 2 -2, and once you do it, will be in the you'll be in the same status as mine, right? So as I say, let's try to see if you already have a test. Uh, if you don't see my screen, just let me know, right? So we said, okay, we have to run Python manage.py, and then we have to run the test command, and it should run the test that we should have, right? And yeah, so any file that starts with test should be considered. It will be considered as a test in general. So by default, if we see, so yeah, okay. Before that, I will let me explain you the whole project directory as well, right? What it is it is basically simple to do application server, in which we can do is we can create to do lists, and in those lists we can create to do items, list items basically, and we'll have simply look over it. We have two basic applications. We have two Django project application. One is IAM and one is to do. If we deep dive into it, in the IAM application we have one user model that is basically extending the abstract user model. We have not added any custom attributes to the user model, but it basically exists. And likewise, we have serializers pre-made for it. We already have a view set, but for users we don't have anything, right? Likewise, we have a different application. We have a different Django application, that is Studio application, and this Studio application basically has two models, that is lists and items, right? So if you look at the uh, list, you'll see that okay, any user, if you look at the model, we can see and we can understand that, right? That any list will have several properties that will be there will be the name of the list. Likewise, there will be the status of the list as well, whether it is in pending stage, whether it is in done stage, or whether will be in the archived state. And we'll also have a deadline sort of thing, so that we can also decide that, and okay, that this list has to be completed in that particular time amount of time or not. Likewise, we have serializers, and we have view sets for it. So view sets is also simple. It is a model view set. Let's forget it for the timing. Model view set is there. See those dash folder. Oh, yeah, yeah. You don't see it. It should be pushed. I think it is pushed already. Yeah. So, can you check out to this? If you check out to this. No, yeah, but we're not. We're not inside any test folder. We're not inside any test folder, right? It is to do folder. We are not. We don't see any test folder here as well, right? we don't have any dashboard. Or if you might have it, yeah, if you even have it, it should not have anything in it. And we are not talking about it as of now. So let's just forget about it, right? Even if it does not exist, it is cool. We are not looking over it. So if you see in the model view set, we have a simple query set, list.objects.all, and then we are passing a CL as a simple basic model view set that we have in general. Let's forget about it. I was trying to do something cool, but it was not working, so I just left it. Permission classes, you can see there are two permissions that we have applied. One is authenticated, and the other is the list permission. What does this list permission do is we have added permission on the has object permission, right? So uh, 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 what it does, it basically it is checking whether the request, if the user is not super user, and if the user is not an admin user, then any operation that they would want to do on any list, they should be the owner of that list, right? If you see the list has a field user, and then since it is an authenticated API, they should be able to actually get it, right? So yeah, we are just checking for it, and if it does not exist, if they're not the super user or the admin user, then they should be the owner of that list. Otherwise, it won't work, and otherwise it will deny. Basically, simply as simple as that, right? So these are the permission classes, and sort of extended it, but it does not do anything in here. It is mostly for the documentation purpose, so that in the documentation also we should be able to see those things working in the place, right? We also have a very nice documentation. If you simply run a majority of run server, you can open this point, and then you can head to this location. I will share the link over here as well in the chat. I am sharing the link. If you check it, you will see that we have two basic roots of the APIs. One is the auth. So what it does, it basically you give the credentials of username and password, and it basically gives us the access token and the refresh token. Likewise, if you have the refresh token, you can simply check it. You can simply pass it, and then you will get another set of tokens. Likewise, we have to do application, and if you see, all these are all the REST endpoints, right? For items, we have a set of endpoints uh, to list it, to create it, to retrieve, to update it, to partially update it, and to destroy it. And likewise, same for the list as well, right? So yeah, you can, if you want, you can check it out, the documentation as well of the APIs, and we can also see the parameters that we will be passing to those endpoints and all. So this is already made so that we can simply write test for it in this tutorial as of now. So yeah, likewise, if I open the items folder, I will see that I have a model that is item, and I have a name. We have a content model that is a text field, and then basically it has a foreign key to the list. Why this particular design? Why not add a many-to-many column in the list itself? That might have also worked, but I intended to add a sort field so that we can order the items inside the list. That was a basic funda. That's why a foreign key in here, not a many-to-many field directly over in the list model itself. Likewise, ECS field and basic things, right? That we have, like, again, we have the same permissions over here. And if you see the permission again, if the user is a super admin, or if it is a staff, they can do anything. But otherwise, the list, for example, this permission is attached to the items resource, right? And item has an attribute of list. So if we see, the item does not have any direct relation with the user, but the list has, right? So that's why this clause that object.list.user should be equal with the request dot here, so that only those items that user owns, he should only be able to update those things. He should be able to delete only those things and not anyone else's and all. Like a simple syllabus for this thing, and again, simple model we set for it as well. It is very simple, if you can see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, permission is even not attached to this part at this point of time. All right. So yeah, this is the basic project structure. I mean, these are the two resources that we have, and we'll be writing mostly test for those only. How we can in the whole tutorial, we'll be just looking at it how we can probably make use of factory and all those things to create tests and different things like that, right? So for the timing, since we are through since we have gone through how the project is the orchestrated, and okay, sorry, Brent. Yeah, so if we can now since we know how the project is divided into different things and what all we have in the project itself, let's simply focus on writing our first test. So as we were checking, we were somewhere here. Hmm. Just give me a moment. Yeah, let me pull it apart so that it is not present and present full screen. Yeah. Okay, cool, right? So yeah, as we were talking about, right? The default for in order to run the default test, we had to run this command, and we simply have to make sure that the test file, the Python test that we'll be writing, it should be inside the test folder, nothing else, right? So let's do one thing. Let's check out to module -2 branch, so that we can simply see. I will just share the branch here as well. Okay. Yeah, just check out to this branch, and then we'll all be here, right? And if you see, by default, if you look here, we already have a file that is test.py, right? And here, if you see, are you able to see this thing? Had already created a class for you. The first to-do list test case, and then we had two functions over it, right? Yeah. So let's write some code over here, right? So the first test that we'll be writing, the first test that I will be writing will be about just checking if the models are working fine or not, right? So we know how things work, right? Or for example, what happens is when we use Django ORM, it basically creates, the user model. We can simply create the list and item right from the ORM itself. So in this first basic test, we'll just simply try to run those things, right? What we are gonna do, we are simply just gonna say, okay, let's say user equals to user dot objects dot create, and then we'll be simply passing something like username equals to test user, and then password equals to test password. User is not imported here, so we can do something like user equals to get the user model, and then we can import it here as well, right? So if you see, from django.contrib.auth, we can import get user model, and then we can say, okay, why we are doing this and why we are not importing from here, because in settings of PO, it is a good practice to, if especially if we are especially if we have defined custom user model, it is a good practice to often get the user from the get user model function rather than directly calling it, so that the user model that is defined for the settings.py, I will simply show it as well. So if we head over there, settings.py. Okay, there was a typo, settings.py, right? So if we see, we have the auth user model, right? So right now it is something like IM is the name of the application that we have, and inside that we have a model named user that we just saw initially, right? So when we do get user model, it will actually try to get the model from there, and then it will use it. So we are safe from all of the from both the sides in general, so that if we change it sometime, we don't have to change the import over here. We can simply change in that place, and it will simply just work fine. So yeah, let's just create the user over here, and let's just create a list. Let's just create a list. How do we create a list? We can simply do list dot, list dot objects dot create again, and we can do something like, okay, name equals to test list, and then a user equals to the user that we just created over there, and again we'll have to import the list. So make sure you import the list model, not the list of the Python library. So make sure that we are importing list from todo.list.model and not from anywhere else, so that it is actually pointing to the current model, and not to some typing list and things that already have in Python. So yeah, once you do that, now if you see, we're doing things. So let me explain you it as well, what we are doing, right? So as we saw, when we define a default test in Python, we had to do a few things. The first thing, as I said, was that the file name should be something like test.py, So we meet the first criteria. Second thing should be that a class should be created, and in that class should basically inherit the test case, should inherit from the test case as a parent class. This test case is something that already exists in the Django.test module or library. We just have to create a we just have to create a class from it. We have to inherit a class. We have to create a class inheriting from that test class, and then it provides us two functions basically, or rather, I should say, whenever we create a test. So if you remember the point, right, we were talking about a data isolation in test. What happens is whenever we run a test, basically a new database is created, and whatever we run over here, right, setup thing, right. So basically, whatever we do inside this setup method is used to set up the environment for that specific test. So for when we'll run Python manager.py test, what it will basically do is it will create a database, and then it will run these things. I mean, as a what we're trying to do is we are pre-filling the data, pre-filling the database, right? We are inserting these values before running a test. So in the setup method, whatever we do in the setup method, it will be used to pre-populate the database, and often we use the setup method to pre-populate the database so that we can run some tests over it, right? What do you, I mean, then you might ask a question that probably then how test works, right? So the first thing was, if we recall it, the first thing was the name should exist, start from test.py. Second thing should be class should be inherited from the test case. The third thing should be whatever method we define inside, right? A method that actually starts with test underscore is considered a test. If I add something else, something like, if I, let's say, if I say def list test, if I write my method something like it, then we this won't be considered as a test, and this method won't be called when we'll run Python manager.py test. So it is very important that when we are writing a test, we have to remember that the method should start with test underscore, so that Django knows it that okay, this is a test and this is not a test, right? That's how we distinguish between the member function and the test function that we actually have to test. I hope we are clear, right? So now what we are doing is in the first test, what should we do is let's simply write test and see if so since we have data isolation in database as of now, when we'll run the test command, nothing exists. Database is totally empty, right? I mean, nothing exists in the database. It is completely empty. So when we will run this test in the setup method, these two things will run, and in the whole database, these two things will exist. First thing would be that the user will be created, and its value will be stored in a database. And the second thing would be this ORM will again insert the list values inside the list table. And now in the database, these are the only two things that will exist in general, right? But let's see if it one if we run this, let's see if it actually if it actually does insert it or not. So what we can do is, again, the test, what we can do is, okay, we can do something like list.objects.get, and since we pass something like it, if it has actually inserted those things here, then probably it should simply call, we should be able to get it inside the test as well, right? So it is also important to know that if I write another test, let's say test underscore two, and then I do something like it, and then if I do something over here. So it is important to understand that for all these tests as well, we will have database isolation, right? Whatever after running this test, the database will be cleared again. The database will be populated again with this thing, and then only the second test will be run. So we had to understand that we cannot chain different tests inside it, right? Whatever I will do inside this test will be isolated solely. After this test is done, whatever happened inside this test will be totally lost, and a new database will be the database will be cleared, and then again setup method will be run, and again it will be populated, and then only second test underscore two will run, right? So this is one of the things that we have to remember, so that we don't end up doing something like okay, we let's say we do something like set dot name equals to, let's say, test underscore two, and then we do something like list dot save, and then here we are checking, okay, that okay, we since you updated the name of the list here, why we are still getting the name as test list and not like no test two. Because we have a database isolation. After every test run, it will be wiped again, and then it will be it will be again fetched in data. So yeah, it is important to remember that this is how it works in general, right? So yeah, as of now, what we want to do is we would want to run something like this. There's when we do test, when we import things from test case, it by default gives us few things. One of those methods is self.asset equal, right? So what we are trying to do over here is we are trying to check whether the name of the list is something that we pass or not. So if you see over here, when we were creating the list, we passed a name, something like test list. So we expect that when I try to fetch it, then the list that I will get it, the name of it should also be the same that I passed earlier when I was trying to create it. Right? Likewise, when I when let's likewise when I create when I try to check the username of the user for which the list is created, the username of that user should be test user because we passed it here, right? If it does not exist, then it will fail. So then, if you have written something like it, then you can simply do something Python manage.py, and then you can simply run our test, and it will say that okay, it found one test, and then it said that okay, it ran one test, and it said okay, it is fine. It did not find any issues over it, right? For example, just to check, if I let's see if I change it to this, and if I again run it, it should probably fail, and it should say that yeah, you see, right? We see that the test has failed. What it is also showing us a difference, right? It is showing us that the list dot name that it is getting is the test list, whether the one that we are passing over here is test list 121212, right? And yeah, that's how it is telling it that this part of the test is something that has failed in general. So yeah, this was one of the basic tests that we could write off as of now. And yeah, if you want to write, I hope you are also like not I hope you are also writing the same test alongside with me, and we should be good till over, right? Yes, I will simply just get resetted so that I will screen my sets, and just to see it, I already have a solution over here. So if you check out to this branch model 2 and solution 2, you will see that we already have a test for it, so that you can refer it, right? Okay, this is how we do it in general, right? Okay, so this was one of the basic tests, and now let's think about writing a different test. For example, this test was as simple as creating models and then checking it, right? I will simply wipe it up so that we do it from scratch and not some rocket science in general, right? Okay, so at this point, if you see, we already know that ORM are very advanced, right? We're not. I mean, it does not make sense for us to write test for it because yeah, Django has already written test for it, and they are making sure that it works fine every time we use ORM, right? So when we'll write test for it, we obviously we won't write test for it. Rather, we'll be writing test for our use case in general, right? For example, what would be our use case if we see, if you remember, we had this document AP documentation, right? We are basically we have created this API server, and then we will be probably sharing this API documentation with one of the client team, so that they can incorporate those things in their clients, and they can interact with our server and all, right? So let's have a look for it as well, right? What can we do so that we can simply call those APIs. So before doing it in a Django way, let's take a look of how we usually do it, right? Without when we don't write test. What we do is we simply open Postman, right? So in the project itself, what I have done is sorry, I think it got stuck. Yeah, let me see if we can simply close this. Like I think it is. Yeah. So what we usually do is we use Postman, right, to test our APIs in general. I mean, this is the basic developer thing that we do whenever we create an API, and then we check it is working fine and all. So we had the philosophy is that we have to do the same thing, just that we will do it here. We won't use Postman, but just to show you how how it will happen probably. I would show you in like, okay, I will simply run the server the old way that we do, right? We do Python manager py run server, and then we can simply, okay, yeah. So since I have deleted the users, I just dropped it. I have to create the new user. So I will do something like this. It will ask me for the username. I will say, okay, this is a username. I will put my email. I'm creating a new user, and let's just pass this thing as simple user. Okay, I'm fine with it. Then I run this again, right? So in this project, we won't go there, but in this project, what I have done is I have implemented a simple, like, simple jailability token based authentication. So whenever we pass, like, this kind of username and password to this endpoint, it basically gives us, like, the access token, right? And then what we do is we copy the success token, we probably paste somewhere in the postman, we just save it, and then what we do is we want, let's say if we want to create a list. So we know how do we create a list. Okay, first of all, I have to make sure that the API is authenticated. Let's see what happens if we don't do it. If I simply pass the name of the list, and if I just pass it, it will say, okay, it will give me, okay, it will tell me, okay, that 401 is it is not like no authorized. So yeah, that's how I know that permission is working, right? Now I say, okay, let's do something. Okay, let's pass the token that I have, since I already pasted over here in the environment variable. It will utilize the token that I just got from the previous API, all right? And you can see that I am able to, like, create a list. If I just do again, we will be able to, like, get it again. So these are, like, these are ID fill is not there, I guess. That's why we're not able to see the difference. But say list three, and I will have it in general, right? Uh, Basically, I'm able to create a list, right? Likewise, if I want to see what a list I have, I can simply, like, just call a list API, and then it will return me a list of items that we have, right? Oh yeah, so that I just really probably should also have the ID key, so just to differentiate it, like, in a uniquely differentiate all the three items. But yeah, so we see that these things are working. We will also see that, okay, if you're able to update those things and or not. And I mean, yeah, this is how we usually do, right? When we make an API and when we give to client, right? So that is something that we are what we are trying to do is we want to, like, we want to copy the same thing but with our test, not with the Postman, right? So yeah, let's start with a few things. First of all, since we are using REST framework, since we have made APIs using REST framework, right now, if you see, we were calling APIs via Postman, right? But when we'll be writing the code, we won't have Postman inside the Django. Instead, what we have is, since we're using REST framework, we have something like API client. So consider API client as something like, that it is something like, it is somewhat similar to Postman. What Postman is, like, doing for us, we will be using API client just for those things only, right? So let's just import it. That from REST framework dot test import API client, so that we are able to use it. And then what we do is we create a client. A self dot client equals to API client. We just do it like this, right? Now, if you see, what we have done is we have created a user, right? We have created a user, and what we want to do is we want to create a list as well. Let's do something like it. Let's create a list. List dot objects dot create, and then we create a name, and then we also pass the user. So now for this, again, this was the first that we wrote, and this is the second test that we are writing. Okay, this is the second test that we are writing. We have already run this part, right? Now this is the second test we are trying to write. We are trying to see if we can, like, make an API call, and if things work or not, right? So yeah, we have a client. Probably we don't know as of now at this point of time. We don't know how we'll do it, but we know that, okay, we have an API client with probably will be able to make API calls now, right? So we did this as well. Now, if you see, these are the two things that we wanted to create in general, right? We created a user so that we should be able to use that user in all of the tests that we will write inside this test case class. Likewise, we have already created by default test a list so that we can also test the list endpoint whether it is actually returning or not, right? Probably now let's do something like, okay, let's create again rule of thumb. The name should start with test underscore. Let's say test underscore list, and yeah, let's just write something like it, right? And then I say self, and then probably I will do something like, I have to make an API call as well, right? So probably how can I do it? I do something like, okay, self dot client dot get, And just don't miss me out. I will explain you everything over here, right? What is happening inside this thing, right? So if you see over here, this client is something that we know, right? Now, obviously, probably most of you might have guessed it. What we are trying to do over here is when I say client.get, then probably we are trying to we are trying to we are trying to make a get request with some endpoints, right? We don't know what that endpoint is, right? And if you see that this we are passing some reverse and list type relation and things like it, right? What are those things? We also have to understand it because there are two things. Either what I can do is I can do something like I know in the Postman that okay, this is the endpoint that I have. I can simply copy it and I can simply just paste it here. And this is one way of doing it. And the second way, the better way of doing it is using reverse. What is reverse? Basically, reverse is an inbuilt method with which what it does it basically, if I pass it the name of the method, it will actually give me the actual path that has to be called in general. So now how it is how we are getting to, we are how we are able to say that okay, I have to pass only list hyphen list and not anything else. Again, there is a reason for it. It is not something that we are doing randomly, right? So if you see over here, if you see in the let's understand the how URLs are distributed inside this in this project itself. So this is the main project URLs.py. If you see, okay, we have admin panel admin panel we have, and we have two endpoints for token creation and all. Likewise, we have an endpoint for to do. We have an endpoint for these three endpoints of documentation, all right? If we see this to do endpoint basically refers to a file we are using include, right? So UI.py file inside the to-do application that we have. So inside the to-do applications, we have a file that is UI.py. If we open it, if we will see that what we are using is we are using a simple router. That simple router is nothing but it is one of the by default router provided by the REST framework itself. So this is not something that we are manufacturing out of thin air. It already exists, right? And whenever we create a model view set, we by default we attach it with the this is how we do it, right? We create a router, we create a simple router. Or we have different options. Either we can create a default router, we can create a simple router, and then I think we already also have one few more options to do it in general, right? So we do it, and then as per the standards, since it is a hash endpoint, the name should be plural, not singular. Since the name of the resource is item, so we'll use items. Since the name of the resource is list, we'll use list, not list, right? We'll use list. S is important because it is plural. And then we attach the model we said that's already set. And if you see, we also pass this parameter that is base name. We also pass this parameter as base name, right? So here, the base name is list for this endpoint, and for this endpoint, the base name is item. So it can be anything, right? It should not. It is very constant that they both are matching, but it is not. It is not a thumb of rule that it should match. It is up to you. So why we are passing a name here? Because when I want to refer this endpoint, I can simply use this name to refer any of the endpoints inside that router. So that is why it is important to name it. If I don't name it, then I will have to go with the hard code way. I will have to pass things individually. I mean, I'll have to then pass slash to do slash list and things like it, right? So yeah, this is wrong. Yeah, it should be list and list. So again, list makes sense. How what do we mean when we say list, right? So let's understand how how things work in a DRF endpoint. When we created a router, when we create a REST endpoint, what basically happens, right? So for example, when we created a list endpoint, I'm not talking about the thing that exists before list. We are talking about what happens after we have a list endpoint, right? So in a REST, typical REST endpoint, we have something like this. We have a get endpoint, we have get endpoint, we have a post endpoint, and then likewise we again have a get endpoint. Then we have a put endpoint, we have a delete endpoint, and we also have a patch endpoint as well, right? So these are the basic endpoint that we have. I mean, this is the basic definition of REST endpoint. It should have these things, and then only it is known as REST endpoint, right? So if you see, if we make a just a recap of REST framework in general, right? REST framework is a guideline. So what it says is okay that if there's an endpoint, if I make a get call, then it should probably return something. It should return a list of all lists. the name is confusing. I mean, it should be a list of the resource. In this, in our case, the name of the resource is list itself. So basically, we'll get an array, and then that array will have like no that array will have individual multiple resources that we will have. Likewise, when I make a post request to this endpoint, basically what it does it creates a new list. These are basic things, right? For example, if I want to retrieve a specific thing, what I do is I again make a get call, but instead I simply pass the unique identifier. In our case, it is ID, but it can be slug or it can be any unique identifier that uniquely identifies and identifies the resource. Uniquely identifying is the key term we have to understand. It should uniquely identify, right? Because this retrieve endpoint usually does not return more than one item. So that's why it is important that it is a unique thing so that we are able to distinguish things uniquely in general. Likewise, when we make a put call, it basically updates it. Likewise, when you do a patch call, it also updates it. But in case of put call, we have to send the whole object as it is. Otherwise, basically, because it replaces things. In patch call, we only send the fields that we want to update and nothing else in general, right? Likewise, we do something like this. Now, when I am writing an API, when I'm writing a test for these API endpoints, right? Then again, probably these are the like no, these are the six endpoints I would refer to. I can refer to, right? Well, because if we see here, this is the single name that we have, right? I mean, we only are given a single base name that is this, and then we have to figure out everything on our own, right? So what Django REST framework says is basically that okay, for this endpoint we will say okay that like no anything this can, because if you see we have basically two endpoints, right? We either have if you see we the endpoint is either this or the endpoint is this, and I mean apart from it we don't have any other endpoint, right? Yeah, if you see that these are the four endpoints that are very similar, and these are the two endpoints that are very similar, right? So what we say that these endpoints will be called, these endpoints will be what we'll do is what we'll basically say is okay, a base name, and then base name plus list is something that we will use. Base name hyphen list is something that we'll use to identify this endpoint. Likewise, for to identify this endpoint, what we will say, if you see, what we do is list hyphen details, and then we call it detail, right? So, for example, so now if you see, with this two basic things, I am able to cover all the REST endpoints that probably might have that is created with the model view set in general, right? So I hope I'm clear till now how this nomenclature works in the router part. So it is important because when we'll be writing like no tests for it, we this concept is important to understand so that then only we'll be able to write tests for our REST endpoints and all, right? So yeah, these are the two basic endpoints that we have, and these are the two classifications for those endpoints. So let's wrap it up now. Now it makes sense, right? When I say reverse and when I say the base name is list, and when I say hyphen list, that basically means that I'm referring to this kind of endpoints. Now, how do I identify whether I'm making get call or post call? Yeah, this directly identifies and says, okay, we are making an API call to this endpoint and not the portion. Clear? So yeah, then what we do is I'm making an API call. I am making an API call. So what it should basically do is it should return a list of items, right? So when I return a list of items, it will be JSON. It will be a JSON. It should be a JSON item, right? Is endpoint check something? The code should be reverse check something hyphen list. If yeah, so in order to do that, for this thing, hyphen check something is not important. What I pass in the base name is important. So in your case, the base name should also be check underscore something, and then only I should, for example, in your case, what it will happen is something like this. Probably check something will be there, and this base name matters more. I'm trying to get this by this base name so that like no, it should be rememberable for me. I should be able to recall it very easily, right? So this name is important for me. I don't care about this thing because if I know this, if I want to pass this thing, I can simply hard code it, right? And then it will simply work. So we are not referring here, we are referring the base name here, right? Not this. It can be something like this. But yeah, this thing is something that will matter for us. And that base name has to be here. that base name has to be here, and then hyphen. If you're going with these endpoints, we put list. If you're going with the this endpoints, we simply put the detail part, right? Okay. So by default, if I say okay that if I am able to make an API call, what should happen in general, right? First of all, for example, if you saw the postman thing, what happened was when I fetch it, I should get a response. What the response should be? It should be 200 response. I mean, the source code of the response should be 200. It is a REST endpoint, so it follows all the basic guidelines of all of the REST framework, right? So let's do first thing as that one. What we do is again, as I said, self assert equal, and then not this, which should be 200, right? This is what we are expecting in general, right? When I get it, it should be Shreya's code should be 200 in general, and that is what we are relying on, right? Because if the Shreya's code is not 200, then it does not make sense for us to check the length of this as well, right? So let's do one thing. We do Python manager.py and then we run test for it, and yeah, we see that the test has failed. Why the test has failed? It says that you are expecting 200, but I am getting 401. Now if you remember, in the endpoint, in these endpoints, what we had done was we had added this permission classes, right? We had the first one of the, so yeah, regarding the permission classes, we had to remember that the permission classes are evaluated from left to right, right? So whatever is on the left side, it is evaluated first, and then that's how it is resolved to from left to right. So the first permission that we have is authenticated permission, right? So when I say it should be an authentic, it is an authenticated API, but you will see that yeah, I mean we are not even we just have created a client, and basically we are you saw in the case of Postman, right? We firstly fetch the access token, and then we attach it in the header in the bearer, and then we attach the token, and then we use it, right? In this case, I was doing that particular thing. No, we are not doing that thing anywhere. So how do we do here? Again, probably I can do is I can again make a API client, and I can probably make this API call and then get this access token, and then attach it in the header of the request, and then again further do it. But we have a simpler way. Instead of doing all those headaches, we have simply what you can do is simply self dot client dot force authenticate, and then we can simply pass the name of the user. If I say okay, see, now what it does is for example, what is doing is now any call that is made inside this test by default is authenticated by this user itself, the user that we created over here, right? So now the first thing that we are doing here is we're trying to authenticate it now. So now the part of logging here, getting the access token, and then setting in the header for the next API calls is the header of the client, not mine. So that I say okay, yeah, now I just authenticate with the endpoint, and now that will be particularly using the using the access token to fetch the APIs. Now let's see if it is able to actually do it. You will see that yeah, it worked now, right? Now it says okay, I'm able to now log in, and now it is actually receiving the 200 HTTP code. So, but is our test complete? No, because we simply are getting 200. That means it is able to access the API endpoint. But we also want to make sure that when we list it, when the client lists the list when the client lists the list of the to do nodes for the user, they should be able to list the nodes of that particular user in general, right? So what we do is, again, let's say we say okay, response underscore JSON equals to because we have to realize that the response is in JSON. It is not a raw text or anything like it, right? It is a text. So yeah, it should be list, lists list. Aman, if you I just recall it, the base name here is list, right? So yeah, yeah, that you'll have to change, and then it will work fine, right? So when I say what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get the JSON response that I'm getting. So when I do this thing, when I say okay, response is status code is fine. When I do this thing, probably what I'm getting is I'm getting this whole part. I'm getting this endpoint as of now, right? I'm getting this thing. Now I want to check that okay, whether the list of this is not whether the the length of this is correct or not. So that's what I'm doing, and just saying okay, since I had only created single thing, it should only get one single thing, right? So yeah, now it is able to get the list of it. So if it is doing it, then probably I'm good, right? Let's just check for it again. I run my test again, and now you see that yeah, now my tests are running fine. That probably means that I'm getting this list as well. Now let's go one step further. Now let's actually check whether the list is actually the name of the list is then whether the name of the list is the same name that we had passed in earlier, or has it changed? Because if it has changed, then probably like we are getting something else, right? So let's do something like okay, let's do something like list from response. List from response should be equal to, let's say, response, yeah, something like it, and then we do something like it again, right? That we do a set equal. Now since we know that we only have a single item, we can simply say okay, the name now should match the test list that we had defined earlier, right? Let's say if I say okay, let's say for just for fun, I say okay, no, I am expecting something else, and if I run the test, it will tell me specifically that the name of the list is this that we're getting here, but I'm expecting this. That's what it is feeling, right? That basically means that our tests are working fine, right? It is working as intended in general, right? It is working as it should in general, and we are good from that point, right? So that's how I'm able to test the list API. Likewise, let's do one step further, right? Since anyone can say that it is a very simple test, you have a single list. How can you say that your system is robust or not? So we do okay. We go one step further. What we do self dot let's say user two, and then we say okay, we create another user. Let's say we create another user. Let's test user two, this thing, and we get another list, and I do something like list underscore two, and then I create another list, right, with the second user. So now when the test will done, we will have two things. We will have two users in the database, as at the same time we'll also have two lists for two different users, right? So for example, if since from the client perspective, it is very important, right, that any user should get their list, not anyone else's list, right? So it is very important for us to make sure that our API is basically returning the list that belongs to that user, not to anyone, not of any different user in general, right? So that is what we are trying to test here as well, right? We want to make sure that in any of the future iterations, if it happens, it should not happen that any of the user is actually able to get others test others to do lists as well in general, right? So we do this now let's say if I run the test, you will see that if it is working or not. You will see that it failed, right? Why it failed? It is saying that here in the asset equal thing, it is saying that the response that it returned got got two lists, but it should actually expect one list, right? Why? Because the user with which I have logged in, it only has one list, right? It does not have the second list. It does not belong to that user. That means I have some bug in my code in general, right? That's how I am able to predict. That's why I'm able to see. Okay, I have some bug in my code, so that any user should be able to see any of the list of any different user in general. And yeah, I have to fix it, right? So now I see okay, it is returning different things. That probably means in my model view set I'm doing something wrong. Let's look over it. So if we look over it, we see that the query set that we are passing is list.objects.all. That means whenever any user will any authenticated user will make an API call, they will always get all the lists, right, irrespective of whether they own it or not. So now we know we have a bug, and then we fix it. Okay, what do? We have a simple option. We simply modify it. What we do is when we do so what happens under the hood is a model view set by default has a method known as getQuerySet, and what it does, it basically it calls self.querySet that already exists in Java, right? What we're trying to do is we are trying to modify this. How we are modifying it? We are saying that okay, since it is already an authenticated API, that means I will always have self.request user. It will not be an anonymous user. It will be an actual user because the REST point is authenticated endpoint, right? So no one can access it without logging in. So I do just like this. I simply do a quick okay. So what we do is we simply filter it, right? I say okay, self.query.filter, and then filter list. I mean, it will only return the list that belongs to that user. I mean, in theory, it looks fine, right? Okay, I'm able to actually see those things around. So now after I have done the changes, I will again run my code, and I will see if it is working fine. And you see now it is working fine, right? Now it is saying, okay, now we have after logged in, now we have fixed the bug that we had, right? Now since that user is only able to see their thing, since you already have this thing, right? The name of the second list is this, not this. So if I do this thing, I will see that we'll see that this will fail. Why? Because it is saying by the list that the user one is getting has a name test list, not test list 2, because test list 2 will belong to different user, right? Likewise, let's if you want, we can do this same check for the different user as well, right? Let's do one thing. Let's simply copy this thing and simply copy this thing and simply paste it and then say, okay, now I'm doing this for user 2. So everything I'm doing same, but just I have replaced the user. I'm saying, okay, now I say that since this user has different list, so now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make my test more robust, right? And at the same time I'm testing for different things because I have to be my system has to be robust enough so that it handles most of the cases it should handle for from the business perspective, right? So instead of checking only from one side, I'm also checking from the other side. Okay, I'm saying okay that I will log in from the different user as well, and then I will also test it, right? So everything will remain same. When the second user will log in, it also has like this single list. Then it's also it will get a single list in the API call, and then the name of it will be same, right? Let's see if it works. We again run the test, and we'll see that our test have probably run fine, right? Now, just to make it more robust, what I will do is I will again make another list similar to underscore one, so that test list to underscore one, so that this so that this user will always get single, because this how it should be, right? Whenever single user logins, the first user logs in, they should be able to see the single list and his list. When the second user logs in, he should be able to see his list and not others list, right? So probably what we'll do is instead of checking it for it, probably let's do something like let's iterate over here and check if the user over there is basically belongs to that user or not. So if we see in the response, if we have seen in the response, what we get is we get the user ID over here, right? So probably I can check for this user ID, right? If the user ID belongs to the user ID that is making the API call, then also I know that the that list belongs to that particular user. So I do something like this, and then I say yes, and then that's how I do it. Likewise, since we have two here, we say okay for list item in response underscore JSON. Again, I do self dot asset, and then inside it, I'm just trying to see this thing fine, right? So in case of user one, it should only have a single thing, and then that should belong to this person, this user only. In case of second user, the length of the list should be two, and all the users should be the second user, not the first user itself, right? Again, I run my test, and if I run my test, I will see that all my tests are working fine, right? So now I can say, okay, all the cases, how it should work is it is expected, this is how it is expected to run, and this is how it is working fine in general, right? So this was just to give you an idea of what how this is a basic simple test. When we'll jump more into it, we'll write whole test for the rest whole endpoint. That's why I'm skipping the part where we'll be writing tests for creating those resources, updating it and various different cases as well, right? So yeah, this was how we can use default Django test module to write test for it and simply check it out in general, right? So yeah, this is how we do it. We simply create a file, something with test .py, and that's how we define. That's why we say okay, this file has to be considered for writing test, and we simply run Python math.py test, and it should just simply work, right? Solution for this is again module hyphen to hyphen two hyphen solution is where you will find those solution where it have already pasted the working code in general, right? So now let's look what kind of what kind of tests are already supported inside the Django. So I mean, what kind of tests we can write? Probably unit tests are something that is fairly possible. So these are the three types of usually tests that we do in general, right? I mean, when I say I have to write a test, it is either the unit test, or it is integration test, or it is an end-to-end test. So unit test is again, we know it is we are testing a unit, so it is usually checking small functions and stuff like it. the test that we are trying to write is not a unit test. It is more of an integration test, right? I'm making an API call and I want to make sure that the response that I'm getting is working fine or not. So in our case, the test that we're writing over here is an integration test. It is not a unit test. A unit test will be when I will a unit test. It will be a unit test when it will be something like that I define a method and then I'm checking. I'm making sure that that method is working fine or not. Then in case that will be unit test. So in with Django, we can add these two kinds of tests is something that we can write easily. We can add unit test as well as we can add an integration test. End-to-end testing is something that we do from a client's perspective, right? So for example, as of now, what we are doing was we are making the API calls, right? When we'll be doing an end-to-end test, probably what will happen is we'll automate the whole process where a system will it's automatically open a browser, click on the buttons, and then it will try to see if the login buttons are working fine, if they're able to log in and things like it, right? So that is something that we don't do with Django, and at the same time, this is not our part from a server's perspective, right? We just have to make sure that our APIs are working fine, and someone from the QA automation probably can do the end-to-end testing part in general as well, right? So yeah. So this was some of the pre-context of Django test that we have in general. Now let's look at a few parts. For example, if you see, we had written few we had few syntaxes that we are following. If you see, we were writing something like self dot hazard equal and various things like it, right? So while that is good, I mean, you saw we can write all kind of tests with it. Just pardon, let me think for a second. Yeah. So while that is fine, we also have a better option to write tests, right? And that's what we call setting up for advanced testing in Django. Why we call it advanced testing? Because it's not like that it is Django default Django test is lacking something, but with this method we have better options of writing tests, right? We get some better syntax, we get some better options of plugins and extensibility of those things and all. That's why we'll be looking at those things as well. So what we do is, okay, let's simply jump into it. So what we'll be using instead of going with the default Django test that we have, we will go with PyTest, right? So PyTest is again a Python inbuilt Python testing module that already exists. I mean, it is a by default supported every of the native Python. We usually don't have to install any any plugin and all. It just works fine out of the box, right? It is already there in the Python. So if you see the top three features, if I say of PyTest is the simplified text syntax, right? The syntax of those tests are very simple. So example, in case here we were like, okay, I have to write cell dot asset equal. These are the properties of the test case module that we have, right? So while there's nothing wrong in it, if you look, this looks very simple syntax to write compared to the other one, right? I can say, okay, simple as a equal to b. If it does not equal, then yeah, it will simply put a buffering. So yeah, I mean, yeah, from those perspective, little bit simpler syntax. Powerful fixture system will look at pictures, water fixtures, and things like it. But for example, just to give you some basic idea about fixtures. You remember we talked about the setup method, right? What it does it whenever the test will be run, it will populate the database with this thing, and one after the test has after this individual test has run, it will clean up the database and then it will run those things again, and then it will run the another test and things like that, right? Likewise, fixtures, what they do is fixtures are something like fixtures are also similar, just that instead of so for example, what setup is doing here in this before and after running this test case, what fixtures will do is they will run before and after the whole test case has run, right? For example, if I define a fixture, so I can say that, okay, before even initializing the test, firstly run this part, then run all the tests that I've defined, and then after all the tests that you have defined in test.py files, then again run those part and all, right? So yeah, I mean something similar, but on a different level. So yeah, just to give you a very very basic idea. Again, this is not the correct definition, but just to give you very very like some understandable context as of now, this is what the definition that we can hold on as of now. And likewise, it has a plugins and extensibility. For example, PyTest, we also have we have since PyTest is extensible, we have a support of Django as well, right? So we have a package known as PyTest Django, which probably we can simply refer to, and we can install that in our Django project, and that's how we can again run PyTest, and it will make sure that all the tests that we have written earlier, it will just simply run fine, right? So how do I install it? Yeah. So before installing it, let's understand why PyTest over Django is default runner. So again, enhanced test discovery and parameterization. What is parameterization? If you see what is parameterization is, if you see over here, you will understand that these are two tests that are very similar, right? If you see, I mean, I'm not doing anything different here, right? I'm doing the same thing again and again for different user, and that's what I want to make sure when I'm writing a test. So instead of won't it be better, because we all are Django developers, and we remember the policy that Django follows, right? Do not repeat yourself in general, right? So if I have to write the same test, why should I simply should not there be a better way of doing it, so that I don't write the same test again and again, and just change the this part and with this part, because all the other things will pretty much remain similar, right? So we call it parameterization. What we do is we will write a single test and then we'll parameterize it, so that the single test will run with different parameters. It's more like calling a single function with different parameters, and so that I write a single test and then I can call it for various use cases, and that's how I should be able to run it in general as well, right? So, so those things are by default supported in PyTest. If I have to do this in the default Django test, it is not very much possible, but with PyTest, it is very much possible. And again, the plugins and the extensibility part is something that is very very helpful in case of Django. So again, how do we do it? Configuring PyTest in a Django project. What we do is simply, I will simply stash it, get stash, and then I will get checkout main. So what the command that we have to run is okay. I think it got stuck again. Hmm. So yeah, what we do is poetry add minus g dev and not factory boy. We do PyTest and Django. This is the command that we run. And we had to, so let's understand this command as well, right? What we are trying to do over here is we is again, it is similar as a poetry syntax, a poetry add and then the name of the package. The other parameter that we are passing over here is minus g and dev, right? So what does it define? So since poetry supports group based dependency, what we have done is we have created different groups of dependencies. For example, if you see these are the main dependencies, and these are the these are the dev dependencies in general, right? So yeah, just ignore this. I think I had earlier added this as a main part of the dependency. But ideally, I mean, when I will be deploying my Django application in the production server, PyTest Django will won't have any say over here, right? So just to just to optimize some space and some package some Docker image resources, I can simply define it as a group dependency, so that when I will be building it, I will build it for those dependencies, and I will skip out those things which are not required in the production system, because in production probably I won't be running tests and all, right? Those will be part of some pipeline, some CI/CD pipelines and things like it. So that's what we are trying to do. And once we do it, we're good to go. I mean, we don't have to do much changes. We have to, since we are a poetry based project, so we just have to define the simple option, that is tools, PyTest, or initialization options and all, right? So if since we're using poetry, this is how we define it. You'll get it in the syntax of the official documentation as well. If you're not using poetry, then we have to define and .ini file as well. I think it is known as something like pytest.ini file, and there where there is a altogether different syntax over there. If you open if you open the pytest Django documentation, you will simply find those things. So you can simply, so yeah, as it is saying, if you are not using something like PyProject sort of thing, then we can define it like this. If you're using populate.html, we can simply copy it and it will just work fine. Yeah, all those things are defined over there in the official documentation itself, right? So then again, what is this Django setting module? The name of the package. I mean, this is a basic thing, right? We and the name of the my project is server, and then inside there is a file setting.py. I am just referring to it so that I can find it. And at the same time, if you remember, in case of inbuilt inbuilt Django test, it was pre-set that probably any file that that is something like test st should run. But in case of PyTest, I can specifically say that okay, I mean I can define my own rules. So if you say I have defined my rules that okay, test st.py should be run, and then st test.py should also run. So now, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's something like you have flexibility to go with your convention that you would want to go, but that is something is by default not supported. You have to do some customization if you go with the inbuilt Django test module and all. So yeah, this is one part of it that we get from here, and then from a test writing perspective, I don't have to do any. I don't have to do much of the changes. If I can again, let's say, let's go back to that tab again so that we have the same option in Civ, right? And get the stash op so that we have the same thing. Yeah, this is the that we written over there, right? I already have PyTest Django installed over here, so I can what I can do is simply instead of writing Python manager your test, I can simply write PyTest and then enter, and all the tests will run as it is, right? Because yeah, now you see the you are the the response how you should get earlier has changed, but if you see otherwise, everything is otherwise similar. You're saying okay, three pass tests and these are working. And now additional benefit will be I can change this syntax. I can probably do something like assert and the name of this thing, what I want to compare, and then add something like it. Likewise again, assert and then this thing. I can say okay, it should be equal and then like it. So I can have an I can do some boolean check as well, whether it is true or false and stuff like that. I can do all those things in general. So yeah, just to give you we can use the syntax as well. You don't have to change the test if you're going with PyTest. Just that we get more option flexibility of writing tests in different in a bit more understandable way. Nothing else. The core part remains same. Now at the same time, if you see what happens is when company grows, right? For example, in one of my large companies, we had close to 2000 tests in our pipeline in general, and that used to slow our whole process in general, and that was something that we used to worry about, right? So if you go with Python manager.py test, we don't have much option to to use parallel processing and things like that. But with PyTest, it is possible for me to run those tests in parallel. So what I can do is probably let's say if I had 2000 tests, I can say that okay, run all those tests in a thread of let's say 8 threads and all. So what it will do is probably it will create it will spin up 8 threads of the PyTest process, and it will in itself it will distribute those tests among themselves, and so that my probably my testing time will be halved, or it will it will basically reduce in a very much greater extent in general, right? So yeah, because yeah, obviously it is testing multiple things on a parallel basis. So yeah, that's what the benefit that we get with the parallel computing and all, right? So yeah, that is possible with PyTest, not with the default Django setting model, right? So now if you see in the test when we were writing this thing, right? We will resume writing test in a while. Just before I want to quickly address your point to one part that I wanted to check, right? That part was, for example, if you remember here, this is something that we have been doing again and again. If you see, right? I had to create these things again, and I'm saying okay, user.object.create user. I'm saying okay, list.objects dot create, and then I have to pass this names again and again. And as a human, probably we can obviously we will run out. At max, what we will do is we will say okay, test list one, test list two, test list three, test list four, and things like that, right? Things are the point is basically that after some point we run out of names and then we start naming things in a different, right? So instead of doing this thing, what won't it be better, like, if we have something that should, populate those things on a with the relevant data. For example, let's say when I say, okay, I have to create a, user module for testing purposes, it should create a user model that should have realistic data, as the same user, right? I mean, if I'm saying, okay, it should have a first name, so the first name should be realistic. It should not be something like, okay, gibberish XY, QWERTY UIOP or and things like it. But it should be something like, okay, yeah, John, Kuldeep, and, Bhavna and stuff like it. The point is, it should be realistic names, but not the actual names. And at the same time, I'm also not doing the hard work of, creating a dictionary and then taking care of it myself, right? So yeah, obviously, if we somehow, if we're able to have those functionality over here, it will be very, it will ease our, whole process engineer. It will help us in, create driving tests that are very realistic with the realistic data. And at the same time, we know that we have a, different we have differentiation between the different entries that we'll be creating into the database for the test purposes as well in general, right? So that's where, things like factory boy comes into the picture. That's where when we come that's where when we say factory boy and faker, which was one of the, prime focus of the session was also there, right? So what is factory? Factory boys is something like, what it does is basically, I as I said, my problem is something that I should pass the model and it should, populate. It should, populate it with the relevant data. For example, if I'm saying that, okay, that create factories for, user model, then it should create realistic factories with realistic names. Okay, yeah. Okay, the names are realistic, and I should at least find it relatable with my context and all, right? So first thing is that the factory boy, simplifies the object and test. I mean, instead of doing this every time, I can simply, just call one method and it should take care of it altogether in general, right? So I mean, that is the end goal. That is what we are trying to look for. The second thing would be data consistency and validation, right? For example, what do I mean by this is, in case of this, if you see, I'm just passing anything over here. But if I say that, okay, for the user factory, it should be the first name should be the first name, the last name should be the last name. If I have, let's say, if I have an address field, then in address model, let's say if I have an address model which has something fields like, city, state, and pin and zip code. So it should be the realistic zip code that should be entered. It should not be like, okay, 123, and in another place it is like 12345 6 and things like that, right? So with factory bar, it becomes easier for me to, pre-populate those data for testing purposes and all, right? So that I focus on writing tests, not on populating the database. And at the same time, I save a lot of time and, my energy in, deciding the name. Okay, if I should name it list one, or or I should name it list underscore one, or I should name it list underscore or so, right? I don't want to, jump over there in general, right? So I want to utilize my time in a better. So that is where factory boy will help us. Likewise, it is again easily extendable, and it is customizable thing, right? And that is where factory boy actually relies heavily on Flickr, right? So if you have been working with Python, you might already be aware about the Flickr library. What it does, it basically under hood. When I say factory boy is more like a wrapper over on top of the on the Flickr library. Flickr library is the one, one library that actually does all of the tricks, right? So when I say I want some realistic names for the first name, then the Flickr library will give me the realistic names of the first name that might exist, right? And what Factorify will do is it will align those uh, faker align those, options of faker library with the Django model, so that now I am utilizing the capabilities of the Faker library to populate to populate my models. Now we'll see how we can create, those models. We'll see that in a while. Likewise, I can also, create local specific data. I can say that, okay, I don't want English names for the first name. I want some Spanish name. I can say I want some Indian names. So there is also a possibility with the Faker library. You can dig more. You can dig more in the Faker library, and you will find a lot of documentation about how you can do it. But yeah, it is very helpful, right? Sometimes what happens is, what there was one time, what our clients used to be from across the country, across the globe, right? Most of our clients used to be from the United States, and the new set of customers that we were onboarding, they were from, from the Spanish background, from the French background, and things like that, right? So what we had done was we had written tests with faker library, considering that we'll get on US names. But what happens is in different names in different cultures, they have different pronunciation, and they also have different, like, that single quote, double quotes, like things like, I mean, the way they write their names are totally different, right? And we had never tested for it, and that's where the, we started our API, our API started failing, as in our web started blocking it, saying that okay, no, the tick cannot be here inside it because it marks it as an HTML, or XSS. It is what identifying this request an XSS attack, and it's sort of blocking it in general, right? That's where we said, okay, no, yeah, this is that's when we got to know that okay, this is one Spanish name that we are getting, and that's why we started test for those things, and then that's how we corrected all those things in general, right? So yeah, sometimes local specific data is very, very important when we are writing tests, and that's where the Fickle library will come very, very handy. It is very, very versatile and customizable, right? When I say versatile and customizable, what do I mean? For example, let's say if you look at the model, right? In this model, if I see, I don't only have, this thing, string based fields. I also have a field known as status, right? I also have a field known as deadline in general, right? So with Faker, what I can do is I can say that, if I want to keep my, test data set very, very random, what I can say that, probably okay, in the status field, probably choose any random options from this three possibilities, right? Since it is a text dot choices, I can say okay, that from shader dot choices, just pick any random choice and just put it out over there, right? So these are the customizable option that I have. I can probably, add some custom functions and pass it to the Flickr and the factory boy, and they will make sure that, they're generating those things based on my logic as well. In general, sometimes I can say that okay, choose it randomly, and sometimes I can say okay, use my logic to, determine which value to use and all. So yeah, that was all about factory point faker, and that's where we'll be doing it, right? So let's jump over, writing some factories, because yeah, that's what this workshop is all about, right? So what we can probably do is you can just check out over here, and I will just hit search do hit check out main, and then we can all check out to this branch. I think module 4-2. So I guess the working branch I had not created. So what you can do is you can create git checkout minus b module, and then 4 I think we on the 2, right? This is the command that you can simply run. I have already added this, but let's check it out. I will put this command here as well. So you can also create the same branch, and we can then work on it, right? So, sorry, not the second hyphen, this one will work fine. Yeah, yeah. So, once we check out to this branch, now let's try to create the factories for it, right? We'll see how we can create factories for the models that we have in our server as well, right? So let's see how it goes. So if you see, I mean, again, so as I said, since we're using PyTest, we can, put anything. We can put those factories and those test files anywhere we want to in general, right? And that's why also I have put, instead of creating a test directory, I have put those things in a, very, very random folders in general. If you see, inside the to do application, we had two models, items and list. What I have done is inside those applications, I have created, the test folders, and then inside those factories, you will see that I have created this items file engine, right? If you see, are you able to see this as well? Inside the factories, are you able to see one file item.py? If you can simply, just put thumbs up or yes in the chat, it will validate it. Yes, okay, great, right? So yeah, we we were supposed to write it actually. But yeah, no worries. Since it is a solution, but let's have a look over it, right? Let's close everything. Let's understand it, what we have written over here, and let's keep the model side by side, and let's see how we are converting the model into a factory, right? In general. So I'm not writing tests as of now. I'm talking about factories only, how I can pre-populate the details and all, right? So if I say side by side, okay, what I do is we create an item factory, and then we are the package name is called factory boy, but the name of the package is actually how we import is with the name of factory. So inside it we already have a support for Django model, or it basically supports various ORMs. One of the ORMs that it also supports is Django model as well. I think it also supports SQL alchemy and different things as well. But since we are using Django in our project, we'll be talking about mostly Django model factory, right? So if you are aware about defining serializers, it is very much similar to that. We create a class extending, for example, if it is a model, if it is a serializer, we extend a class from a model serializer parent, and then we say, okay, the meta class will be model equals to the model name, for which we will be defining it, right? So it is a similar thing that we are doing, right? We have created an atom factory, and then in the factory we are saying, okay, that you have to inherit from this class, so that it knows that it is a Django model, which it is trying to populate, and then I have defined various fields. So what will happen if I don't define these things? If I don't define these fields, then it will randomly put anything over there, right? So it knows, if only if I define it, it knows that okay, it is a field that has which has to be put like a name. So understand that this name and this name are not same, right? If you remember, we just talked about faker, right? Factory bar depends a lot on faker. So I am telling faker that give me a name, and that I will assign to my factory, right? So that every time when I create a instance of this factory, every time it pulls some name, some magically it pulls some name from its dictionary, and then it assigns it over there in general, right? Let's keep this list factory aside as of now. Let's talk about the content. So in the content, for example, in the item factory, for example, we have a list, and inside the list, we'll have some items as well, right? And in items, we usually write something like, okay, I have to I have to go talk to, I have to take doctor's appointment, I have to go there, I have to do this assignment, I have to submit that ticket that I had, and it can be anything in general, right? So that's why I'm saying instead of yeah, I'm just saying okay that I will use faker, but I will just populate it with some random sentences, right? I don't know what those sentences will be, but I'm saying, okay, it is some random sentences so that it will also populate it accordingly in general, right? Likewise, for status, as I was saying you, right, that what we're trying to do is I just said that, okay, instead of defining anything, instead of fixing a specific value, I'm just saying that, okay, from a status dot choices, since status dot, if it is a text choice, yeah, we will talk about subfactory just in a while after we cover this, right? So since schedules.choices is a list, what I can say that, okay, pick any random element from the list, right? So if you see that list, basically probably it can only have three values. It can either be in a pending status, it can be in a done status, or it can be in an archived status, right? The simple 2D application, right? I created a list, I created an item was over there, and this probably either they are not done or they are done, or I have probably deleted them in general somehow, right? This is what we're trying to do. Say, so I said, okay, for status, probably put something uh, random from that list, and I don't care. If I want, I can also simply pass something like this as well. This is also possible. I mean, no one is sort of stopping us from doing that. I can also pass something like it, and it will be fine. There's nothing wrong in it as well, right? Either I can assign some some figure values from figure library, or I can simply assign some fixed string as well. It will, as long as the data type matches from the data type defined in the model class, it is fine. As long as it matches, it will definitely work fine. There's no such issue with it, right? Now, if you see in the item model, we have a foreign key, right? So these are the character fields, but this is a model field. And this is a sorry, model field as in this is a foreign key, right? Basically, this points to a different table altogether in general, right? So what I can do probably is, I can either leave it empty so that nothing happens, or what I can do is, I can say that, okay, whenever that list will be whatever the list will be a part of the a subfactory of the list factory itself, right? For example, again, if you say what is a list factory, again, it is defined in a very very similar manner. If you see, we have a user, and then we have name field. Again, we have use subfactory for the foreign key. So you can say that if we have foreign keys, we can simply use subfactories in general, And yeah, again for the status field, again I use some random thing, again like use random or random element concept here as well, right? So what will happen is, for example, let's say if you remember in the earlier test, what we were writing, right? What we were writing was we were doing something like let's write in a comment, doing something like item dot objects dot create and thing. We are doing something like it, right? So we will pass an item for it, and before it to happen, we'll have to create something like list equals to list dot objects dot not dot. Let's also create it because we were creating it earlier, right? And then name equals to blah blah in things like it, right? Likewise, we also have to define user equals to user dot objects and things like. So now, if you see, it will be created as a user. So now, if you see, just to define an item, I will first have to define user, and then first I will define a list, and then only I will be able to create an item. So this is fine. I mean, there is nothing wrong in it because this is how it should be, right? But the other way could also be that I don't want to define like this nested items. What I can do, since they are a part of like they are part of they are the subfactories. What I can simply say is item equals to item factory, and I can just simply say, and what it will do is it will try to create an item factory. Occasionally says that okay, the name should be like the name should be a fake name, the content should be a sentence, the shader should be binding. But when it comes to list, it says that I have not passed any list over there. So then it will say so that okay, it is since it is a sub factory of the list factory, it will create a list automatically by default, right? It will say when the moment it sees that it is a like part of the subfactories, it automatically creates a nested element related like foreign key for that part again, right? Likewise, when it will be creating the list item, it will see that okay, now we in the list factory itself again we also have a factory of the user factory, right? So again a user will be created on it. So just by creating the item, I am creating the nested links of all those things in a linear way without like specifying things myself. Obviously we also have a choice. We can again we can do something like user equals to, I can do something like it, and then I can again I say user equals to this, and then I can also say loan equals to this, loan equals to loan, sorry. So in this case, again, it is the same thing in general. Like no, as we create a model, it is also similar. If there's a field that I want to like modify myself, then I can just simply pass those as a parameter, and then these are the default values, right? These are default. If nothing is passed, this will be used. If something is passed, then this will not be used in general, right? That is what we're trying to do over here, right? I can simply pass it and then it will be just in general. And I can do it multiple times. For example, let's say if I want to create things in a bulk, what I can do is I can say, since now creating here, if I have to create it multiple times, what I will have to do is I will have to do something like, let's say something like for I in range 10, and then I will have to do something like, list dot objects dot create, and then I will do something because that makes sense, right? In this case, what I will do is I will can simply say, and then I can say create underscore batch, and then I can say that I want like 5 of it, and then it will just make sure that like the and it will become loans because obviously it is not a single item, it is multiple items now. So just by passing this, it will make sure that now for this user so this should be list. I don't know how you got into loans, but yeah, it will make sure that now for that user we have like no file lists. And likewise, I can also say for these things as well, I can say again, okay, for this specific list, for the specific loans, like do something like that, and all, right? So you see how these things are making things easier for us, how factory boy is making things easier for us, and that's what we do, right? That's what we want to do. We want to make our job easier so that we can write tests faster, and then you can further test it as well in a very faster way, right? So now let's see how our test will look like when uh, when we will write tests for them in general, right? So I hope everyone understood this part, right? How we are defining a factory, and how we are connecting it with a model. In the next module, we'll be checking how we can write tests with it, how we can write tests with these things as well. Are we good here? Are we good till here? If there's any concern, if there's any question, we can take it now. or let's move. Okay, thumbs up. Hmm. Okay, so now what we do is, yeah, as I think solution of it was also already made, so you can simply check out to git checkout and then this and then solution. Already, I think it is already merged in mean, so it will be a part of it. But I think when if you check out here, all the factories are already created there, so it should be like a fairly simple for us in general. Let's write test for it now, right? Earlier you see we were using single-handedly we were doing things. Now let's use factory boy, and now let's start some test in a in a better way in general, right? So yeah, this was about populating data with it, and that's how we integrate factory boy and faker in general. We already talked about it. We just saw it, right? Now to coming to the next part of how do we write tests in general. I think before it I just want to check. I already have I think 4C solution. I just want to see that it is not something that I'm omitting. Hmm. If I see test, okay. How do I refresh it? Yeah, load from this. Okay, cool. I think I don't have. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. So let's write it again. Right? So yeah, that was a part. We have already seen about those things. How do we integrate it? Let's now write our first test. So obviously we have written our test already, but now we'll be writing tests from those angles, right? We'll be using factory boy, we'll be using faker, and then we'll later on then we'll again try to test the advanced things. For example, if you see I don't know if you remember or not, but if you see, we had defined some permissions, as well, right? Those permissions were something like that the admin user should be able to access it, but it should be the admin user should be able to access anything, but this user should not be able. Normal user should not be able to access anything, right? They should be able to only access content that they own. So yeah, we'll slowly we'll start writing tests for them as well in general. So moving it, let's set our first test, writing test in for Django REST endpoints. Now with factory boy and faker around, right? So yeah, let's start with it. Get checkout main. I will check out to this thing. Get checkout NSB module 5.1, and head over here. It this branch probably might not exist, so you can create a new branch as I just did. This factory already exists in general, so now I just have to write test for it, right? So if we remember, just to recall it, since we have written here that any file that starts with test should work, or any file that has something asterisk dot underscore test that should also work, right? No matter in which directory they are. So that's what let's do something like it that let's write test here itself, right? Inside the items folder, we have a test folder, and inside the test folder, we have a directory known as factories. Let's write a test over here itself. So I say something like test underscore something like, let's say this is an item. So let's say test underscore items. Let's write test underscore items, right? So when we write test underscore items, that means we want to write test for this is specific part for testing the endpoint that are defined over here, right? So since we already have defined modules, let's start from scratch. We say okay. I say test. Yeah, again. So the base condition still remains the same, right? Though it can the file name can be on our own, but we have to make sure that we are still devising this classes from the test case branch. So let me just import it from the okay, it is not able to fetch it. Let's just import it ourselves from Django case. Let's import this, and then there I don't want this. I want to write everything from my own. So I'd say, okay, therefore, if you remember setup, right, we were using it since some time now. So now I say, okay, let's let me pass because I have to import this thing again. Now I say rest from rest framework dot test. we import API client so that we can make API clients, obviously. Also, if you like, if you don't understand, if you are not able to understand anything that I'm saying, or if I'm going fast, please stop me so that like I can slow down a bit and I can repeat things, right? So that you don't miss out on things that have gone faster in general. Yeah, coming back to it, we create a test class, and then I say, okay, self dot API, or maybe let's say self dot client equals to API client. I say this, and then I say self dot user equals to. I say instead of defining user manually, now I'm using factory user factory, right? I say this, so now I'm able to import this. I say, okay, self dot let's say list equals to list factory, because we also have a list for it. So I say, okay, list factory, sorry for the typo. And where I say the user has to be this user, not any random user. Otherwise, it will create a different user, right? I don't want it to happen. And make sure that you are importing the list factory recreated, not the one inbuilt over here, right? Because I just realized it later after creating it that there is also a list factory that exists in the library itself. So make sure you are importing the correct list factory that we have defined, the one that we have defined over here, not the one that is defined already by the package and all, right? So we do that here. Likewise, I say, okay, self dot let's say item equals to item factory, and then I say I pass a list over there, right? And then I import the item factory as well. This is what I'm doing in the test, and see if I don't have to do anything in general. Then I say, okay, let's test the list underscore items. Again, how we were writing tests, right? So firstly, if you remember how we were doing it, let's write first test for listing the items, and then for retrieving the items, then for creating it, then for like no updating it, and then for deleting it, right? So let's write 5 tests for all those endpoints, right? With this factors and all. So yeah, what we can do is a response. No, what we want is we want to authenticate it, because we already know that the endpoints are authenticated. So we need to make sure that like our API client is basically authenticated, and it is able to access the API, because we already know it is the base case. So SSL dot client dot force authenticate, and then say, okay, I will say that self dot user is there. I will simply pass it to it, and then just a minute. Okay, cool. Yeah, and what time? Yeah, we have some time. Yeah, cool. So now we do it again. Response equals to I do self dot. Yeah, but we don't want this. We want reverse, not reverse, reverse, not reversed, and then in there a pass. If you remember, the name of the name of the base name was list, and then I say list, so that I'm actually calling the list endpoint, not the any other random endpoint. Then I say, okay, I say assert, I say response dot status code. SQL code equals to, if you remember in the REST framework, you also have a library known as status. So I can also call it, so that now my test looks a bit better instead of like using codes like 200 20. It's fine, but now this looks a bit more informational, right? So I'm just gonna go with it. If I'm getting 100 response, then I say, okay, response RESP equals to probably response or JSON, and then I say, okay, I want to do it. Asset len should be one, because I've created a single list, and likewise, the name should be same. So I can do something like, okay, since it is an array, since it is an array, the zeroth element, the name should basically equal the name that was created over here, right? So again, see, at the end, what happens when we use ORM, right? It gives us, when we run the ORM part, it gives us the instance of the model itself, right? Likewise, when we use the factory, then also in that case as well, it gives us it also gives us the instance of that model itself, right? So it is same in that perspective. So like that's why I'm able to do those things over here, right? And then what I do, I simply run PyTest, and I see if this test is running or not. So it runs, and then it says no, that it says that okay, it is saying that I have an error. The error is basically the syntax that I have used in defining this random element is wrong. We have a way to do it, but this is not the correct sentence. correct syntax, and so I'm not gonna jump in fixing it. But yeah, the method exists, but this is not the course. You already know. You just need to copy in Google and then you can do it. No, it is not about the reverse. I guess it is about this part. I'm pretty much sure. Yeah, pretty much sure that. Oh no, I think. Aha, that reverse part is also there, right? Where did it go? Reverse. Oh yeah. You are actually correct. Thank you so much. So I have to import it from there and then Django. Okay, yeah. But I still feel this might be wrong because I had written this on intuition. So I'll be honest, I'm not very 100% sure. But let's. I told you right, this is wrong as well. So let's just move this part over here and let's just see. I'm just fixing it to pending as of now, and yeah, now things are working fine, right? I have a test where it is saying that okay, the test item is working fine. It is, yeah, it is running this test and it is saying that okay, things are working fine over here. And I also have one test over here. I guess this is also about it. This is about the factories. Okay, and let's not worry about it. Yeah, so see, we are able to write tests and we are able to verify that we are actually getting things in a good manner. Now let's do as I was saying, right? Let's create things in a bulk, and instead of this it should be file now, and then it should be list, not list, because obviously it won't be wise. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create multiple items in those lists as well, right? So what I can do is for list in cell dot list, I can do something like this. I'm not gonna assign, yeah, maybe I'm not gonna assign it item factory, and then list equal to something like, not list, will be common word, maybe list item, so that I don't use the default keywords and all. And I don't need to pass the user over here because it is already there inside the list. So now what will happen is what I'm gonna do is I'm creating, let's say, I'm creating five lists. In all those five lists, I will have five items individually each side. So you can see that firstly, let's check if that is true, if that is working fine or not, and we'll see that it should work fine. Yeah. Now three tests pass. Basically, that means we were able to verify that the response that we're getting is probably has five items. And just to give you the context as well, I will deliberately let me print it so that we are able to actually see it. Now since print statements, if the tests are working fine, it does not print the print statement, so that's why I will deliberately make something like asset false, so that the we will be able to get it. What happens is if the test run finds in the output, I won't see any of those things, right? We have ways of doing it by passing some example, but these are some of the fastest way I'm giving you. That is and there is also the fastest way, but I just don't recall it as of now, so I will go with this way, right? So if you're able to see, right, we were talking about that. If you see, in this is the whole list, right, that we have. Let's just go and let's just see it in the JSON schema thing. What JSON format area? I will go with that. I will paste it and then I will. Aha. Okay. So okay. Yeah. Sorry. This is a dictionary, not a thing. So it is an issue, but you're able to see, right? Now the name is actually yeah, it has picked it thought that this is the name of a person. So yeah, you can see that it has done something else. And likewise it has done things in the name. It has put something. So these are the five lists that we have, and these are the fields that exist over there, right? So I mean, yeah, so you're able to see that it has actually populated things as we wanted them, right? Instead of doing things on our own, this is one of the better way of doing things, so that now I can populate the bigger data with simpler things and all. So yeah, this is how we use create the best thing. This how it functions and all, right? Likewise, we were talking about different user as well, right? So let's simply do self dot user underscore two, and then I again say it is user factory. Again, I'm again calling the user factory, but since this is a different user, the different user will have different name, different first name, different last name, and all things will be different for that user, right? So I can say, okay, list underscore one is like this, list underscore is underscore one is like this, this item, yeah. Likewise, I can do simply these things so that for the user two, let's do something like it. Let's for user two, let's create three items and then you know three items, right? I mean, so basically, user two has three lists and all three lists have three items, but user one has different thing. So likewise, if I copy, let's say items underscore one. Again, we will see how you can parameterize this in the next few sections. But for the time being, we'll be doing it manually. So we'll just copy this part and then we'll say, okay, this is the second thing. And then we see that we should authenticate this with user underscore one, and then we authenticate this with user underscore two, right? And that's again the same thing. This user should be able to get the five lists, and this user should be able to see three of the items over here. So we just pass it, and now all our tests should again pass. But no, yeah. Sorry, why it is not passing? Because if you remember correctly, in this is a list endpoint. If you remember, in the view sets, where is the view set in the list? View sets, yeah. If you see the query set is not corrected, right? So def get query set underscore. So yeah, this is why writing test is very important, right? We are able to identify that what part is missing, what part is not working, and what not, right? So I just write this part, and likewise I will copy this for for the items as well, so that when I will write code for it, I have this thing. Likewise, I'll pass also one more permission that we have written, that is item permission. Item permission will simply no item permission. Okay, we'll simply import it, and yeah, now I think we are probably fine. It should be working good in general. So yeah, this was about it. And now if I run it, you should be able to see that our issue has been resolved, and we can validate it. The test is, oh no, interesting. So see, let's how do I hide it? Okay, let's jump in here and let's see which test is failing, right? So if we see over here that in this test attributed test items object has no attribute user underscore one. So yeah, that is correct. User underscore one does not exist. So we fix it. User underscore now it is fixed. In that part now it should probably work fine. Since I let's assess it again, right? Okay, yeah. Again, this should be user one and this should be user underscore two. Now things should be fine, right? If I'm going too fast, just you can ask me questions. But yeah, you see now we are passed, right? For list one belongs to user one, list two belongs to user two. We had some we are not doing it correct, so that's why we had an issue. But by test we can verify that user one is always able to see this thing, and user three is always able to user two is always able to see his items only, right? Now there is a different catch, right? If you remember what we said, that the admin user should be able to access everything. I mean, they should be able when they list items, they should be able to say everything. I mean, since we are not considering about things like privacy and policy over here, we are taking it things from a technical perspective, right? So let's just assume that it is a possibility, and they are able to say it. There is no such restrictions over there from any perspective, right? So now if you see, when I say admin user, right? So in a Django model, what happens is an admin is defined by two things, right? First of all, these are three flags. These are three flags that we have by default, right? We have is this is user factory. We have is staff flag. We have a is active flag, and then we have a is super user flag, right? Is super user is basically to define a super user. Staff is for an admin user, and is active just to make sure that whether that user should be able to log in or not. The moment I make this flag false, they won't be able to log in. And if I have to show it, I think probably I can show it by probably updating a test as well. I can just make sure that is FIC is active equals to false. This test should fail because yeah, I mean, yeah, that's how it should fail. It should say that it is failing. Okay, so probably the login logic that I have, I will have to write some custom authentication layer, custom authentication class. Probably that might take care of it. But since I don't have that logic, I think that's what it is probably allowing me. But usually the concept of this flag is to denote that part only, right? But we are caring more about this is a staff and is super user flag as of now, right? Because we are saying that the user, admin user should be able to like see anything in general. They should not be restricted to any specific things and all. I mean, only like if their account, but any random accounts that exist on the platform altogether, right? So for them, now if we say, if you see what I have done is I have defined another user factory that is again a part of the user model. But in this case, if you see, there are two things that varies here, right? If you see over here and if you see the flags over here, right? Is this staff flag is true, is active flag is true, and is super user flag is true, right? That means that any user created via this factory will be an admin user because these are the hard-coded values. Instead of this, if I say that okay, you have to use a random value over there, then it won't make much sense. Why? Because yeah, I mean it won't make much sense over there because then it can make any user an admin user, it can make any random user a non-admin user as well, right? And that's where my test will basically won't be good enough to like test with that. I mean, it will create a lot of confusion. Sometimes the test will pass and sometimes the test will fail. So that's why different user altogether. So let's do that as well. When I say self dot, let's say admin underscore user, I say okay, it should be an admin user factory, and I import it from there that we just define simply over there. And then what we say in the let's say in this part, I say okay, definitely. So as per the technical requirement, what should be the case? The admin should be are we writing okay items or yeah admin. Let's slide something like it, and then when I say self dot client dot force authenticate, when I do something like it and when I authenticate with the user, I again make the same API call. And this time what I'm expecting is that we have total 8 items, so this should be able to get 8 items, right? I mean that is a product requirement, right? I mean this is how we code, right? We get some product requirement from the from the product development team, and then we write code for it, right? Now we are trying to validate whether our code is working fine or not. So let's just see if our code should, if we have any bugs or not. It is saying me no, it is telling me that it is not able to fetch anything despite it is an admin user. They're not able to fetch anything. So since these two tests are working fine, that means that the logic that we have for the non-admin user is working fine, but the logic for the admin users is not at all in the place, right? What do we do? We again check the view set that we have. We go here and then we see that, and then we realize that in the get query set model, what we are doing is we are simply querying for the normal. I mean, we're just simply doing a filtering over there. We're not checking whether that user is an enemy user or not. So what we can do over here, we can say okay, if cell dot request dot user is uh, is a staff, or cell dot request dot user dot is a super user, then yeah, return then instead of this, yeah, save dot query set dot. Otherwise, do this. Now, what it will do is, if you see, right, if the user who is trying to access this endpoint, if they are actually an staff user or an admin user, they should be able to see anything. But the normal user should be able to see only their part, right? Now, remember, right, we already have tests for this part. So if by any chance, if this thing breaks the older logic, then what will happen? This two tests will automatically fail, right? Because yeah, if the non-admin user logic fails, then this two suits of tests will definitely fail, and this test will pass. But I have to make sure that all of these tests are passing in general, right? Because this is how it should work, right? Here, so the point, if you see over here, how we are trying to convert business requirements into tests, right? These are the business requirements that we might have gotten, that we might have got, and we have converted those business requirements into some tests, and that's how we are checking whether the code that we have written is actually correct or not. And that's what we call test driven development, right? We write test for it, and that's how we try to validate it. Let's see if it works or not. Let's we run the PyTest again, and after running it, you see that still it is not running, right? Still it is not working fine. That means that yeah, that means yeah, that simply means that we have done changes in the wrong place. We have done changes over here, but we are making an API call over here. Yeah, those are at different endpoints, right? This should not be test underscore items. This should be test underscore list. That is a some that is an error from my side for the like nomenclature and all, but you get the point. We are making an API call on this endpoint, not on that end. So that's why it is again failing. But when I run this part, you will see that now all the tests are passing, right? Now that ensures me now that as a developer, now it is giving me giving me the confidence that the part that I had written earlier for the non-admin user as well as the part that I have written for the admin user, both are working place. That means I have done a good job, right? Just give a pat on your back. We've done a good job over there. That's how we are trying to test it, right? So this is one aspect of it. Like now we have tested about it, right? Now we also want to make sure we have different tests as well. For example, we want to make sure that for example, when we create a node over here. So if you see when I showed you the Postman request earlier, what we are doing was we are passing a simple name over there. Somehow magically, this user was coming over there, right? And let's do one thing. Let's firstly update the serializer so that we see the IDs as well, because I think it becomes a bit hard without the ID. I will simply add the ID part over here so that we see the things are getting created and all. Again, ID over here. Yeah, cool. I will let's spin up the server, run server, and you will, as I told you, right, the isolation part, right? Whatever test that I have written over here, I mean, they don't exist anymore. After the test is run, they have like gone, they have gone away. But since this was something that we created, like outside of test, this will still pursue. For example, if I just make an API call, you will see that okay, yeah, my token has expired, so I'll have to make an API call. I'll have to get a new token. I just copy it, update my environment variable over here so that I use a new token, and then I make the variable again. And you'll see, no, yeah, now you see that I'm getting these things again, right? Yeah. So if you see, when we were trying to create a list over here, we're not passing any user, right? But it was automatically assigning it, right? How it was assigning it? Let's have a look at the serializer itself, right? So if you look at the serializer, this is the serializer that where the serializer list, and then we have serializer. So if you see over here, in the user field in the list serializer part, we what we are doing was we are expecting the primary key of the user that has to be put over there, and by default what we were trying was by default we were passing the current user who has sort of who is actually making the API call, right? And that makes sense, right? For example, if a normal user is making the API call, it does not make sense for us to pass the request ID separately, because I know who is calling it and I can simply do it. But at the same time, if an admin user is calling it, then probably I want to allow it, right? Admin should be able to create list for anything, for anyone from anywhere, right? He should have that, at least he should have that access so that he should be able to create, they should be able to create list for anyone. But a normal user should not have that functionality. Let's have a look at it. If you remember, we already had one user. Let's increase it. Let's do something like let's create another user, make migration, and then create super user. And then I say okay, username kdp is the 2, email address hello@hello.com, and then in the password again put the same password and do it. Oh yeah, it's fine. Okay, I run the server. Now I have two users, right? Probably that the idea of okay. We can see, actually we can log in as well, but since we had only one user, that ID should be the user number two. But since we stopped the server, I think we'll have to get a new token because this token won't work anymore. Copy it, we update the token, and then in create list we'll see. So if you see, if I make the API call, now the list is getting created with the name of user one, right? And then I do it again. What I want to do is I want to pass a user. I want to pass a different user. Let's say the user should be second user. I do it, and now you see now the second user is created. And if I make the API call, the user is only getting no. If you see, since it is an admin user, right? We created two admin users over here. We did not create a normal user. We created two admin users. Let's do one thing. Let's create normal users as well and see if we are able to do it. I think it was KD Pizza, and then this. I am okay. I'll have to register the users as well. I am an admin. I do okay. I call admin.site.register, and then I say okay, and then I say okay, user, and let's how we do it. User equals to again get underscore user underscore model. We do it like this, and as I said, good practice when we define anything, and then I save it. So probably we should have something here. Yeah, we are able to see it. You'll see we had two users, KD Pizza 1, KD Pizza. Let's create another user. Let's say the password remain the same. I don't, yeah, I am not making it the user. Let's say I'm calling KD Pizza 3, and then I'm saying the first name should be okay. I think I can simply ignore it. I simply, yeah. So now if you see, KD Pizza C is not an admin user, right? It is a normal user with the same password, and we have an admin user with different things, right? So what we do is again we log in with the third user, the normal user. We do it, and the KD Pizza 3 was it not correct? KD Pizza 3 was here, but oh, did I change it? Oh, password. Aha, okay. So yeah, yeah. So the way I have not extended it further. Uh, so I will rest my case from here. Let's go from the test, right? So the point why I was trying to show you was that uh, we want to make sure that only the admin user should be able to do it, right? Not any normal random users, right? And that is what we want to prevent. So let's write test for it as well. When I say okay, test create list for let's say for self. When I say for self, so I say okay. What I do is I log in again with my user. With these users, I do so. If you see the basic normal thing, right? We're making a post call on the same endpoint with the data as name equals to this and format equals to JSON because yeah, we have to specify it as well, and we want to make sure that it's working fine. So if this is the current user, if this is the normal user, if it is not passing the user ID, then what should be the user ID? The default user ID, right? And given the point that this is a normal user. If I run the test, if I run the PyTest, this test should run fine. This test should be working, and it is passed obviously. This is what we want, right? Now, what I want to update it slightly. What I want to do is I want to say something like, okay, user equals to now. It isn't give. See, we have to understand. We have to remember that this is a normal user. It's not an admin user. So when an admin user is creating a node, it should be assigned to that specific user itself, right? Not anyone else. So again, we make an API call, and we see okay that we are trying to see if that works. Ideally, should not work because that is not an user, but the tests are passing, right? And that is a big that is not a good thing for us, right? We have to make sure that only admin should be able to do it. So what do we do? Then let's do one thing. Let's change it. Let's copy this thing again. For self, I will just copy duplicate this so that we have different tests for it, and then I will change it, right? For self, and then for others. For in self, it should not be should not pass anything, and it should be user underscore one. So this test should pass, and this test should fail. So we run it, and it should this test tests are passing. That means that this test is we have some we are deviating from the product requirements over here, right? So now what we do is again we go back to the basics. What we do is since if you remember we have a serializer over there that is like doing all the base that is basically working over here. And since we are using serializers, if I go over there in the serializer, you see that we have defined we have like default field over there, and that is what we are using as a. So what I do now is I define a method. I mean, if I work with serializers, you might know that in the serializers method we have a validate method, as well as I have also an option to validate specific field that can be something like validate underscore user, validate underscore the field name that I want to validate, right? Now what I want to do is I want to cell dot context, and then on the request part, I am not able to. I think the syntax probably is wrong somewhere, but let's see. Let's try it. This Copilot associate, maybe it might be good. Let's see. So yeah, what we're trying to see over here is, we want to make sure that the user that we get over here, right? So the user that we get over here is basically should be equal to the request user that we are getting from the request, right? I mean, if it is an admin, then it can be anything. If it is not an admin, then both should match, right? This is what we want to make sure. So what we're doing over here is we are getting the user, and then since this is user instance itself, we are saying okay, if dot is staff, or let's do it in a better way. Is user equals to cell dot context, and then yeah, like this. And if I say user dot is staff, or user dot is super user, and then whatever I'm getting over here, it should be passed, it is fine. Else, if I say in other case, if, not else, if user, no, not it should be req user, so that I can distinguish, right? Both names were matching, right? So if it is a staff user or a super user, then it should, like, it should be, it should basically simply allow it. Otherwise, we had to check whether, like, the request user that we are getting, request underscore user, if it is not equal to the user that we are yeah, if that is not equal to this, then we say that validation error, we raise a validation error. You can only create list for yourself, right? And as a by default thing, we have to return a value. Otherwise, yeah, that field won't be populated in engine, right? So now, by the way of it, it looks fine, right? That normal user is not able, should not be able to, create a list for anyone else, and that means should be able to create it. Let's see if our test sees it. If it works, then this test should fail, right? And you see it is failing. And since we are using a validation, since we are raising a validation error, we are getting a, like, 400 over here. So we can simply upgrade this thing. We can say okay, if any user tries to create a list for a different user, they should simply, like, get 400. And yeah, then it does not make sense for us to check over here. What we can do further is we can check for specific errors. For example, in when we work in real life, we don't want to raise these generic errors. Other, what we do is we define some custom errors, and, like, with custom error codes and things like it, so that we can specifically check for those serious codes in our dash as well, right? And that's make things easier for us as well. So yeah, likewise you can do it. And if I see if things are working fine, now see this test is checking whether he's able, if they're able to create it for themselves or not. And this test is making sure that they are not able to create it for anyone else in there, right? Now, if you see, we have written a lot of tests, right? I mean, we have written a lot of tests, and are you getting the point, right? This is the crux of how we are going with the test-driven development with Django, right? We have a REST endpoint, and we are writing tests for it. At the same time, we are, like, developing and, like, fixing the bugs for it. This is what I wanted to show to, like, all of you with this tutorial. This was one of the basic points of, this was one of the main focus of, like, this tutorial, to show you all those things. So if you see, we just wrote one of the, like, basic tests for it. Likewise, writing tests for the custom actions in nation points. We'll talk about, like, the duplication part just after it. So writing tests for custom actions in nation point, right? So if you have worked if you have worked with model view set, you will remember that in model view set, what happens is we also have an option to. So in the morning when we started the session, right, we talked about 6 endpoints, the 6 REST endpoints that we get by default with Django REST framework, right, with a model view set, about listing things, about retrieving things, about creating, about patching, putting, and deleting. So we talked about 6 endpoints that by default gets created when we create a model view set. But what about if you want to create, we want to create a custom endpoint? For example, in DRF, there's a concept of, we have an option of defining custom actions. We call it actions, right? So we again I will see def, and then let's say something like this is the issue. Let's say I want to purge. It method this method already exists. More like okay, send reminder. Okay, let's do something like send reminder, and then I do something like it, and then detail equals to false and request and all. Yeah, request will I will get request, and then I do something over here in general, right? And this is how I define one custom actions over here. uh, so now what will happen is, apart from all the REST endpoints that already exist with us, what will happen is we also get another endpoint, right? Now again, so if I just start writing about those endpoints again, right? Those apart from those six endpoints, now we this is a list endpoint, so it will be something like list, and then it will be, since I'm doing this, it will be something like this, right? And then I'm saying get, so it will be get method engine, right? So just by writing this, I have created this endpoint. Likewise, if I do something like if I define something like detail equals to true, so we have to understand what does this detail mean, right? So what happens is, when I'm creating a custom endpoint, either it can be something like it, or it can be something like this. I can do something like okay, I can define something okay, that okay, I want to define custom endpoints for specific objects, or for in general specific things. So send specific reminders, send specific, so it will come here over here, right? So again, after REST endpoints, these are the only two possibilities that exist. I'm talking about how the URL structure will look. I'm not talking about the method of the request, right? Because again, it can be anything. When we are testing with our test, we want to get to this endpoint, because we already know how to set the method of the request in general. We can simply say server.client.get to make the get request dot post for post, and respectively for the different known requests that exist in general. But how do we refer to this specific endpoint, right? That is very, very important to know. So now, for that, remember this detail part is important, right? When I say detail equals to false, that means that I want to append this custom endpoint right after the list endpoint, right? I mean the base name, and then I don't want any parameter on it. But when I say that the detail equals to 2, it becomes something like pk equals to none as well, right? So that means that there will be some list ID, and then for that list ID, I will be doing something. For example, let's say if I want to implement something like sending reminders in our application. So what I can say that we instead of creating something, so again we are talking about the possible ways of implementation. Let's say both are these two post and endpoint implementation. What I can do, if I'm implementing something like that, I can do something like okay, and then I can do something like list equals to list ID, right? I can do either something like it, or I can simply make a post call over here. These are the two possible ways how I will implement it, right? And these are both valid options, right? But since we're going with the REST approach, usually this option looks a bit better choice. Again, it is very subjective, and it's very personal thing. But from a standard, from a consistency perspective, it looks very, very. This looks more better. Why? Because we know that this is when we are making this endpoint, when we are making this API call, we are specifically trying to do that thing for this object, and not anyone else, right? So yeah, we might have an option when we work in real life. We usually have we usually have these encounters where we have to take care of these things as well, right? So what we do is, in test cases, remember, right? Here we are passing. So if you remember, there are two possibilities, right? One was a base name slash list, or the base name slash not slash base name hyphen list, or base name hyphen detail. In case of action, when we define custom action, what will change? The simple thing that will change, it will remain as it is. Instead, what we'll do is we'll simply write the name of the method as it is. For example, in this case, if I want to access this endpoint, I will simply release the base name and the name of the method. But remember, in the hyphen case, right? The name of the method is usually it will be in a snipe case when we'll be defining. as per the Python standard, but when we'll be referring on the in the reverse function, it should be in the hyphen case sense, right? The underscore will be replaced by hyphen and things like it, right? So when we want to call a send reminder, because we're not passing any argument, it will be like it. When, for example, if I want to call the other one, the send specific reminder, it will become something like it with an option of arguments, right? And in the arguments, I will simply pass the list of it, something like self dot this one zero, I mean zero dot, I mean, yeah, you get the point, right? I mean, I will try to pass it. So this is also one thing. For example, when we make API calls to endpoints like detail, where in the URL itself we are required to have, those primary keys or the identifiers or the slug, unique identifiers or the slug. In that case, we have to pass these arguments by default. In case of like endpoints like list endpoints, we don't have to pass any arguments because nothing has to be placed on the URL endpoint, right? But in case of this endpoints, we have to place it. So yeah, when we have custom actions, we have to remember that this is how we actually call this is how we actually point to that specific endpoint. All the other thing remains same. I mean, nothing changes apart from this part. Then in case of actions, we have to remember that this is what we have to take care of, right? So yeah, this is how we write custom test for custom endpoints. And now how can we do mocking for third party services and all? So for example, usually what happens is writing tests for things that are in our control is very very easy, but writing tests for something that we don't control is very very hard, right? Because for example, we might be integrating with AWS, we might be integrating with a different service and stuff like it. But writing tests for it is not feasible at that point, because whenever we'll be writing tests, we can't simply just call those services, right? Just to make sure that okay, if our system is integrated with them correctly or not. In that case, what we do is we call patch API. We use something termed as patch. What we do is we patch those calls so that an actual call is never made to those endpoints. Rather, we just mimic those things so that you know that uh, uh, so that we actually invoke the endpoint, but then we replace it with something else, right? Instead of calling the actual third party service API, we make it call something else. So for example, I will give you a very simple thing. In this case itself, right? Let's say I want to update the save method itself. I want to update the same method itself. I mean, I'm like sort of updating it, right? So I'm not. I actually don't remember the syntax for same method in Serializer, but there should be here. Uh, Create method, right? Yeah, cool. So let's just copy this thing as it is. I just did it, and then yeah, I'm just doing it, right? So what I'm saying is, let's say somehow it has to it has to call, let's say, some third party API call. Let's say there's a function. Let's say third party API call for the for making things easier. We are just making writing this function. It can be anything. It can be something that is triggering some third party system and things like it. And we don't want that to happen when we are actually writing test for it, right? So let's say I will say print, and I will say okay, third party call, so that whenever we save it, I think we will get that in the log that okay, this thing was called, and we say okay, a third party API call. And I will deliberately will have to fail one API just to see the logs. I guess so. What should I fail? No. Yeah. Let me fill this so that git list for the set. Let me fill this so that I see that endpoint. Right. Yeah. So you will see that this third party is getting called somewhere, and somewhere I might be hitting the log third party. Okay, yeah. So thing is, I'm basically rejecting it on the validation part itself. It is never getting created here. But okay, let's do one thing. Let it, let it. No, let's do it here, and then here, let me do. assert false, so that this test will fail, and I can see the logs clearly. Okay, yeah, so you see now when we are trying to create it, when we are doing our running our test, this third party API, this third party API are actually getting called, right? But that is something that I don't want, because often that will happen, that we might have some credits and stuff like it, right? Sometimes, for example, if you're using Cognito and stuff like it, we don't want to actually create users in the, like, our IAM provider and things like it, because we are just testing, right? It doesn't make sense to create random users in places where we have to pay more money for, like, managing all those things and all. So what we do, what is the solution then, right? So what we do is we patch things. How do we do it? For example, when I'm trying to call this API, what I will do is I will patch it. What I say, okay, with patch, this is the keywords. With patch, I will, like, pass the, like, I will pass the location of it. I think it was going correct. uh what is the location of it? To-do list, to do, yeah, I think it is going good. But I don't want this. I already have that part. Yeah. So whatever API I was calling earlier, I have those things again, right? I'm not changing it. I'm just putting it under a patch. I'm just, like, putting it under a scope, so that now what I'm doing is, instead of yeah, what I'm doing is I'm patching this thing so that this thing is actually never called. Instead of it, a mock is called, right? Mock is something that is a mock, that is a mocker, that basically will replace this call, and so that uh, whenever we call this method, it will actually call something that is more, that it will call something that is basically not the original API call, right? But it will behave as if it was the original call. And the beauty of this is this particular theme basically works everywhere in, right? So what I want to do is I want to make sure that whenever I'm trying to create this thing, right, this endpoint should be called. I mean, that is the test, right? Obviously, I'm mocking it, but I want to make sure that in reality, when things are in production, this should be called at least. I mean, this should be called once when this method is called, but it should not actually call it in order to test it, right? So this is what we are trying to implement over here in this segment. So what I will do is, I'll simply say assert dot mock dot call. Like, it gives me a boolean, and if this is called, then it is actually, you see, if earlier we were saying the third party was getting called. If I run this test now, the test will obviously fail again because I have put aside false here. But we'll see that, yeah, see if in this test now we run this part, we don't see third party call, right? If we never see third party called here, never getting printed over here, because now this patch part has basically replaced this thing with a mock call. And this is a very basic example of it, right? For example, there's a possibility that I might be passing a lot of arguments, and I can exactly check with those individual, like, arguments as well. For example, if I see assert mock dot, I can say, okay, it was called, it should be called once. I can also check for it. I can also say that, okay, more dot call argument and stuff like it. Since we're not passing anything, I mean, it should not. Yeah, if I do this, it should fail because this function does not exist, expects any parameter, and even we are not passing anything over it. So this should fail. This part should fail. It should say that, okay, this does not exist and all, and this should say that, yeah, this they don't match, right? So you see, it is saying tuple index out of range. So yeah, this part even is, something that is empty, I guess. So I think this should be something like it. This might work in general. So yeah, you see, right? So now I'm also validating whether what were the parameters that were called. So in case of third party, when we're writing, like, tests where third party, like, API calls and things are involved, we make sure what we test is we make sure that the arguments that we are passing are the actual arguments in the specific order that we want them to be, right? Because third party systems are not in our control. What is there in our control is how the parameter that we'll be putting in the third party calls, right? So we want to make sure we will write test code. Obviously, we'll write test code. We'll mock it, but in the test, we'll make sure that we're checking whether we are passing the arguments correctly or not, because this is the only thing that is in our control, because we are assuming that if we pass the correct arguments, the system will behave correctly, and the third party system in which we are behaving, they will respond us, they will respond us very very good, in a very very correct way. This is the assumption with which we are doing this test, right? So yeah, in the third party system, this is what we do. Likewise, we also have an option. If you see right now, I'm just calling a I'm just calling it as a mock. What I can also do is, instead of calling this method, this, so because what might happen is sometimes some calls might change some data and things like it as well, right? So sometimes what we want to do is in test specifically, we want to, instead of calling that endpoint, we want to reflect some changes, right? But we don't want to call those endpoints again. In actually, we don't want to call those endpoints. For example, in this endpoint, I just want to see whether it was called once or not, what was the argument of it. But I also, let's say if I want to, instead of calling this API in the test, I want to call something else for the test as well, right? That is known as side effect. So what I can do is I can say side effect equals to, I can pass a name of different function. Let's say let's me third let me define another function. Def third party API call, and then I say API call, and then I say as a side effect, right? So again, now I will print, I will say not third party call, I will say side effect call, side effect call, side effect call, right? So I want to, instead of calling the original, I want to do some reactionary step. This is what I want to do in the test. I mean, in some use cases, we have to do those things when you will be writing extensive tests. These are the scenarios that you will come across, because I have come across in the past. That's why I'm trying to give you introduction about this a bit, so that at least you have that memory that okay, these are the possibilities, and you can probably check them out at that time and implement on your systems on a, right? So when we were patching it, I can simply say that instead of calling this, call this, and I will just import this thing. Now what will happen in this, instead of calling this function, this whenever this function is called inside this test, because I have put a side effect over here, it just this particular thing will be called by it, right? So I probably won't need this part side effect. Oh yeah, I mean, I don't want to do test for it now. I just simply want to do this. So now if you see, let me put asset false so that I see the logs. And in the logs, we should see, instead of third party called, we should see side effect call. The test should fail, and yeah, you see, right? Third, now instead of a third party call, since I said okay, this should be a side effect, I just put the name of a different function. So signature should be same, so that whatever call we are making to this function should behave as it is happening through how it is expected to be. But just that you should call a different function altogether, right? That is what we call a side effect. Instead of calling the original one, we call some side effect thing. We call a different function, and we call it as a side effect, right? Likewise, I also have an option. Instead of doing all these things, I can simply say that return an underscore value, and then I can say whenever this function will be called, it will return a specific value that I will be defining in general. So yeah, I can just put return value, and if this function returns some values, I can, in behalf of this function, on behalf of this function, in the test itself, I can put some value. I can just define that okay, whenever this function is called, this value should be returned based on some calculation, or based on some function, or maybe based on some side effect and things like it, right? So yeah, this is how we usually, I mean, this is the core of testing third party systems. Either we test the parameters that we are passing, or we do some side effects with it, or we make it return some value, so that we handle the known cases, right? Because what you want to do is you also want to handle the known cases that we are aware about, right? For example, let's say we are using AWS, and we are using both APIs to maybe let's upload some files in the S3 bucket, right? Now we are aware that probably because of we want to have some error handling as well, right? That if by chance if it fails, if the call to Boto API fails, I should be able to properly handle it, right? I should be able to catch it, and at the same time, I should be able to take the necessary required steps so that my flow is not broken, and things should happen as it should. Right? Yeah, I should have a good error management things and all. Right? In those cases, what we can do is as I was telling about the side effects, right? I can make this function return some specific actions, some specific exceptions that Boto API might return. These are also the possibilities. We won't go deep in that part, but these are the possibilities so that you are aware. What I can do in test, I can make sure that whenever this function is called, this should raise a specific exception, maybe like daily limit reached, or that do not have required access and things like it, so that in the code where we are calling those methods, we should have proper handling we should have proper handling of the error control and things like that, right? Sure. This was all about testing the third party system. Now the third last part that I have mostly for the before this is using the parameterization, right? So if you see, I was talking about this since the beginning, that we are writing a lot of duplicate tests. We had to somehow make it short. We have to make it better in general. How do we do it? How do we do it? We is basically we after we parameterize the test, right? So I parameterization Python unit tests. I think there's a package that we have to install. Yeah, this is the parameterized package that we have to install. Since we are using poetry, we want to pip install. What we'll do is we'll say poetry add g minus g, and then we'll see this. So that it will install it nicely over here. And now it has installed it over here. What I will do is, you remember the first two tests, right? I had deliberately kept it here as it is, right? Now what I will do is I will try to parameterize the test. How I will do is, these are the tests that were written single-handedly, right? Now what I will do is I will see how I can parameterize. So I will just say parameterize dot expand is the syntax of how we do it, and then this is how we have to pass a array of tuples. So the tuple should basically match the parameter that we'll be passing. For example, I can say user, and then I can say expected items. Okay, so then in that case, let's import this as well. I think this is how we do it. Yeah, this is how we do it. And then I can simply say, okay, simply I'm passing the tuple, and I have two users, right? User one. So you have to remember that I cannot pass any objects, right? Whenever I'm doing some parameterization, in the parameters, I don't have any way of passing any of the existing objects in general. I can only pass the string. So that is up to you how you can creatively use it. I will show you one example of how I usually love to parameterize all my tests that I usually write in general, right? For example, let's say I know this is user one that exists, and for user one, I am expecting that this user will have five of the items, and then I say okay. For user two, I say this should have three items, right? Now this user will expect a string, not a object. What I want this object, right? So yeah, in Python we know how to get an object from the string. What we do is user equals to get attribute, and then I can say from self you have to pull the self, so that if from the parameterization, if one time if user one is passed, then the user will become this user one, and then I can simply say this user, and I can say expected items. Now, right? Now with this thing, with I know it might be a bit confusing at first, but let's take it slowly, right? What I'm trying to do is I know I cannot pass, for sure I cannot pass a object directly over here, right? So what I'm doing is I'm creating an string out of it, and using the get attribute method, I'm saying that from self I want to I want to get this specific object that exists, and so that when the what this parameterized function will do is it will call this method twice with these parameters, right? Now I have two parameters. these two parameters will be like fitting over here in general, user 1 and then 5, and the second time user 2 and 3. So likewise, I say, okay, now I don't have to do any classification that, okay, it is user 1 or user 2 or admin user. And for the admin user, I can again I can write a single test. I can simply say, okay, for the admin user, I should get each one, and I don't need all these tests at all. I can simply remove this test with single test. If I just run it now, if I run PyTest, it will run very beautifully, and you will see expand. Okay, yes. So I have imported it wrong. I have imported from a wrong place. I think I have to import it from here. Yeah, and I run it, and we'll see how tests are numbered as well. So if you see, test item has no attribute. Oh yeah, sorry, this is wrong. We have to pass this user, not cell.user, right? So that, yeah. Now if you see, yeah, now you see, now this single test covers, takes care of all those three scenarios that I had, right? I don't have to repeat myself again and again. I can just simply parameterize the my test, and it just takes care of all those things on its own engine. Likewise, I can further trim down my test. You see, it was three tests earlier. Now it is a single test. Again, likewise for all these other remaining tests as well, I can simply do it. So I feel that when it is about parameterizing the test, it is all about your creativity, how you can make use of Python, as well as your knowledge of breaking down tests into parameters in general, right? So see, never ever start from never ever start thinking that you will write parameterized test. Every time start from writing a code test, and after you have written all the tests, you will see that some of those tests are very very similar. So it's like we have to remember, we don't have to over engineer it, right? Parameterization is there to help us write tests in a better way, but we have to make sure that our tests are still readable. Just because we want to parameterize it does not mean that we are screwing up with the readability of the code, because at the end we are writing the code for humans to read and machines to execute. Machine will anyway will execute, but if it is not readable and understandable for a human, then we are probably not a very good code writer, right? So that's why it's always required. It is always recommended that you first write tests as per the requirement, and then you start noting down things. Okay, that okay, these tests are very very similar, and probably we are doing the same thing again and again, and that's it feels that I can combine those tests in a single test, and I can make it work in general. So yeah, this was about parameterization as well, and this how you can use parameterization for reusing tests, doing it multiple times and things like it. Sometimes we also want to run this test multiple times. It happens that we want to run this test again and again, the same test again and again. That is also a possibility with PyTest. I just at this point of time, there's a syntax of it. I'm not able to recall it, but with a simple goal, you can save it, right? So I think it is something like Python, PyTest, and then we pass some argument, and I can just say state a number, so that all the tests will be run 10. For example, if I say I have to run all the tests 10 times, so all the tests will be run 10 times again and again and again in general. And a report will be given to us, right? That okay, for example, let's say if I say I have to run all the tests 10 times, so now instead of 7 it will become 70, and it will give me very good insights. Okay, out of 70 times it train all the time, because sometimes it happens is that a single for the first time the test runs, but in the multiple iterations, when it is about multiple iterations, the test it starts to break and it does not work in general, right? So yeah, that is also something that we have to make sure we have to take care of in general when we are writing tests about it. So this was mostly what I wanted to share with you all today in general. Uh, we had already talked about real world scenario about mocking third party services, what we should look for when we're looking to mocking when we're looking to mock those third services. And again, I shared you the some of the ideas of best practices as well. So again, in few ideas will be when we are writing tests, we had to remember that the test should not be something that should be dynamic in nature, right? For example, what do I mean by it is, for example, if I'm getting lists of in this test, what I'm doing is we are creating a list for self, right? So let's say what we want to make sure is we want to write a test, making sure that the whatever response we are getting in the response is never changed in general. For example, if I'm making an API call, this is the exact response I should get. So I can write a test for it, right? Now thing is how I should write a test is I should write this thing in a hard coded manner. For example, I should say that okay, if I want to validate the responses, I should say required fields equals to these things, and I should individually see for individual blah blah blah, and whether they're in the response or not. Not like I pull it somewhere else in the models, something like I'm pulling it from here, like instead of required fields I'm saying retrieve list required fields equals to this dot meta dot. I never ever do this thing, right? uh, Reason because what happens is we are writing tests so that when things that can break systems, when they change, we should be able to identify it. What would happen with this approach is test will still run fine if I simply if I add another field, or if I simply remove another field. What will happen that when I will run the test, this thing is dependent on this thing, this particular change, right? That is responsible for changing the response. So my test will never fail. It will always be like that. It will always be as if nothing has changed in my code or and things like it, right? But ideally, what it should be hard coded in places like it, so that whenever I have a change, the developer who is who is responsible for writing the code, they have to make sure that they're updating the test element so that they're aware that this change will definitely break the system, and that's why they had to upgrade the test as well, right? When it is about updating the test, probably yeah, we're going with in any way we are going with some incompatible changes with the previous versions and things like it, right? So that is what would be my suggestions for writing tests about it. Again, this is something that initially it initially it feels it feels very cumbersome to write individual tests and all. But believe me, once you get a hang of it, you will never write Django without writing tests earlier. I mean, nowadays when I write when I work on any of the project that I take as a consultant, or even for my startup, there is a policy that without tests we won't even review the PRs, right? One of the benefit that you also get out of the box is you can integrate the CI/CD pipeline in the with the PyTest with this test as well, right? For example, if let's say if an engineer is raising a PR for review, right? We just integrate the testing process in the CI/CD pipeline in the GitHub Actions itself. What it does, it firstly a test is it basically run the PyTest over there, and if something is breaking, then we say if tests are failing, then we are not going to look at your PR. First, fix the first make sure that all the PyTest is running, and then only we'll take a look at your PR. And it has saved us a lot of times as well. A lot of times we change something, and in the response as I was talking about, and the test we got to know about it that we are omitting some response in the new versions, and we coordinate with the mobile team, and then we realized that if we do that release with that change, probably mobile will break in general, and that's how it has saved our lives a lot of times in general as well, right? So these are some of the things that I would say that we have. Summary would be something that we have gone through again, but let me go through it again, right? What we have done today till now in the last past 3.5 hours, three and a half hours. So what we're going through is uh, we uh, we had introduction about testing in Django. We talked about test-driven development in Django. We talked about Django's built-in testing framework. We talked about setting up advanced testing in Django by PyTest and things like it. We tried using factories with Factory Boy and Flickr. We wrote some couple of factories. We did some data pre-population with those as well. In the fifth module, we wrote our first test in PyTest with factories. In the sixth segment, we wrote a bunch of a test with mocking third-party services. writing parameterized tests as well. We went to some real world scenarios where mocking is required, where third party systems has to be tested, and those different scenarios of how do we test them, what should be our approach in general, and yeah, what will be the best approach when we are when we're trying to test it. The bottom line should be as the code is changing, the test should also change in that speed. If the code is changing very fast, the test should evolve a lot faster than the original code in general, so that we make sure that we have all the things in place. I mean, our systems are robust, and we can say that okay, we have a good system that basically works and all. So yeah, I mean, that would be my point. That would be my session for today. If you have any queries, I'm open for discussion about it. And yeah, you can reach out to me at that kdpizza everywhere. I am also trying to, encapsulate everything that we have discussed today in the form of a, PDF. I am already working towards it. Probably I would need maybe like 2, 3 weeks, but I will try to I will try to collect all those things in a written manner so that you can refer to it and check it along with the GitHub repository that I had shared earlier. It will. I'm trying to add all those examples that we talked about so that it will be helpful for you to revise. I think video recording will always be there for you. But yeah, I will make sure that you also get the written PDF content as well with it. So that's my time, folks. Hope you learned something. If you have any queries, I'm open for discussion. Okay. If not, then you know how to reach out to me. In most of the platforms, I'm accessible at the KD Pizza. You can just let me know, and we'll be happy to discuss about Django, TDD, and other things. Should we sum up, Sanjay, then? If no one has any doubts or queries. Okay. Yeah, I guess folks are living as well. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, team. Thanks, Sanjay, for being a good host. Thanks, everyone, for joining the tutorial. Have a good day. Oh, I think Ariana had raised some. I think they have left it. Okay, cool.